Tonight, you do not need to try to fall asleep. There is no need to chase after sleep, and no need to fight the thoughts quietly drifting through your mind. Everything has already found its natural rhythm again. The sky is beginning to breathe more slowly. The wind is moving more gently through the trees, and your breath is starting to soften little by little. Throughout the day, you have passed through countless sounds, faces, numbers, and things to remember. But now, there is nothing left to do. No one left to please. No task to complete. There is only one thing that remains: rest. Take a deep breath. Feel the cool, fresh air filling your chest. Then, breathe out slowly, like you are setting down all the burdens of the day that just passed. One more time. Inhale and exhale. There is only your breath and the sound of the night. From this moment on, you do not need to try to understand what you hear. The stories tonight are not meant to be remembered. They are meant for you to simply be inside them. Each story is like a breath, a door opening into the stillness that is waiting for you within. If you feel a bit of peace in this moment, let this little channel become a place you can return to every night. Subscribe not out of habit, but so that whenever you are tired, you can just press play and find your breath, your softness, and yourself again. Now do nothing more. Just listen. Just breathe. Just be here. The first story of tonight is called The Nameless River. Story 1. The Nameless River. The river began from a long-standing ribbon of rain that had fallen for years on the distant mountain slopes, where clouds often rested upon gray boulders, and the earth held the scent of damp pine. No one remembered exactly which drop of water gave birth to the river, just as no one remembers the first breath they ever took. The elders in the valley would simply say that when the clouds grew tired, they paused along the mountain ridges and let down delicate threads of water. Then everything found its own way forward. The river was like that. It was never in a hurry, never chose a direction, and never needed a name. It simply flowed. Throughout its childhood, the river heard faint voices from both banks calling to it. Travelers gave it a different name each season. The raftmen called it one thing, the fishermen another, and the children tossing pebbles from the small wooden bridge had their own names for it. Each name came and went, lingering on the surface like a leaf floating for a while, spinning gently, then drifting farther downstream. At first, the river did not care in the slightest. A name did not make the water any wetter or clearer. It kept flowing like the breath of night. Until one morning, when the sun rose slowly behind the hills, a cartographer came to the riverbank. He set up a light wooden easel, opened his notebook, and tilted his head as he studied the water. He asked the local people what the name of the river was. Each person gave a different answer. The mapmaker furrowed his brow, chose the name that sounded best to his ear, and wrote it clearly on the page. The ink spread slowly, even and smooth, like a strip of night across a bright background. From that day on, the new name appeared on small signs along the riverbank, on shiny silver wrappers for dried fish, and on ferry tickets. The name did not sound bad. It fit neatly, like a shirt, tailored just right. But ever since the name began traveling from mouth to mouth, the river felt that sometimes its flow was no longer as natural as before. Now and then, it heard its given name echo back from the rocky shore like a soft but persistent reminder. You are this. You flow that way. You belong to this map. Spring came, and the water was full. On the tender grass, Meadow's clumsy calves stood beside their mothers. Along the riverbanks, people laid out old nets dried in the sun, patching up the torn mesh with fibers of hemp. The river passed through all these images like a gentle guest. It carried with it small branches, drifting leaves, the last drops of a slow fading rain, and the songs of birds perched on elms near the water's edge. On the wooden bridge, a young woman leaned on the railing, her hair caught by the breeze. She called the river by a name she alone found beautiful. The river heard her and smiled in the way water does, breaking her voice into two delicate ripples that chased each other across the surface. Part of the river felt delighted, another part curious. If there are too many names, which one is truly me day after day? The river heard more stories. Some said its waterers could ease tired feet if you soaked them at dusk. Others said it carried the scent of tree roots and rain. A child believed that if you threw a coin into it and made a wish, the wish would flow to where it needed to go. The river did not agree, but it did not deny any of it either. It simply kept flowing. But the name on the map grew bolder. Newcomers were puzzled when they heard the elders call it something else. They laughed and said, "It is still the same river. Why make it complicated?" They forgot, or perhaps never knew, that water has memory in its own way. The small swirls on the river's surface held a trace of wind. Its hidden currents embraced silt that had left the mountains in last season's rains. And sometimes, at midday, when sunlight spread evenly across everything, the river would wonder whether it could go on living without a fixed name. One afternoon, clouds rolled in from the west. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of freshly cut straw and warm soil. Rain began to fall. The first drop touched the water, forming a tiny crown, before it vanished, like a greeting too swift to hold. The river loved the rain. Rain stirred its memories of the beginning of narrow forest streams, of the soft tumble of stones beneath the water. In that rain, there was something honest. It did not name the river. It simply called it you. Then the wind calmed. The rain eased. The river's surface smoothed as if someone had run a hand across it. When the rain stopped, an old man came down the slope from a small house. In his hand was a tiny wooden boat carved from the trunk of a poplar tree. He placed the boat into the water and watched it leave the shore like a young bird learning to fly. The river cradled the toy boat with a gentle current, guiding it in a steady rhythm. The old man smiled and said softly that when he was young, he had released many such boats. Each one bore a name, often the name of one of his children. Some had gone far, some had found rest somewhere out at sea. Wherever the boat went, the name went too. But in old age, he made boats without names. He said that in the end, what goes and what stays will always meet again in the water. The river listened. It did not reply, but something within its depths felt quietly untangled. One morning, a child came to the riverbank carrying a small wooden sign painted in green. It read, "Nameless River Area." The river looked at it and smiled for a long time. It felt that at last it had been called by the truest thing. It was not by a fixed label, not by proof. Its name was namelessness, and within that namelessness, it recognized everything. It carried the names of leaves, of stones, of the wind, of those who had gone and those who remained. It did not need to know who it was, because it understood that to flow was enough. As night fell, the moon shone on the water. The river paused for a moment, then continued its journey. It no longer asked where it was going. Each curve had become nothing more than breath. The water no longer saw itself as separate from what surrounded it. It understood that the sea, the rain, the clouds, and the river were all one. And in the sleep of the listener, the river kept flowing, slow, gentle, nameless, without borders. At some point in life, we too are like that river. We are born with a name, and as we grow, we collect hundreds of labels: student, worker, parent, success, failure. These names began simply as ways for others to recognize us. But over time, we start to believe they are us, we cling to them. We try to live up to them. We try to become what others expect until we are exhausted, unable to hear the true flow of our own hearts. When a river carries too many names, it forgets that it is water. When a person carries too many roles, they forget they are simply a breath that is alive. The river did not forget its name because it was forgetful. It had learned how to return to itself. It no longer feared being mistaken, misnamed, or forgotten. It flowed. And in that flowing, it could hold 100 names without needing to keep any. Just like when a person stops trying to prove themselves, stops worrying about who they are, they become as light as water. They feel there is nothing left to compete for, nothing to defend, nothing that must be called right or wrong. In that moment, life is no longer a performance. It becomes a continuous, gentle, quiet, natural stream. If there is one lesson the river might offer, it is to live like water. Soft, but strong, shapeless, but whole, unafraid of change. Because every time we let go of names, expectations, and the fear of being judged, we do not lose ourselves. We return to our essence, clear, adaptable, and complete. Peace does not come from becoming someone else. It comes when we stop and allow ourselves to just be. Perhaps to the world, forgetting a name seems like a loss. But to the river, it is a release. Because only when we are no longer tied to the shape of words can we see more clearly the current within us that has never stopped, never run dry. And when we live like that, without clinging to titles, without fearing obscurity, each ordinary day becomes a quiet part of peace. The story of two flameless lanterns. The town lay beneath a low mountain ridge where County Road passed across a meadow and ended at the edge of a pine forest. By day, the air smelled of resin and of cinnamon swirls from the small cafe on Main Street. At night, mist rolled up from Cedar Lake and settled upon the tin roof in a thin sheet that sounded like very soft rain. At the end of Willow Street, there was a white painted wooden house, its wooden porch steps darkened by the years. Hanging by the porch was an old metal lantern. Inside, there was no electric bulb. Every evening, it still glowed. The locals called it the Flameless Lantern. The occupant of the house was named Thomas. He must have been well into his 60s, his hair silver at the temples, like morning dew. His hands were lean and strong, the smell of machine oil and dry leaves clinging to his coat. Each evening, when the freight trains whistle from the distant track echoed through the valley, Thomas sat down on the porch step, placed a wooden box on his lap. He opened the box, inspected each worn item, as though checking the heartbeat of someone dear. That was a habit he had kept since the days when he worked as a lighting engineer for the stage in the city. He had left the city many years ago, returned to Cedar Creek, and begun lighting the lantern on his porch at precisely sunset. No one knew why a lantern without a light bulb could glow. The elders said that Thomas's grandfather had been a lighthouse keeper on the Maine coast, and perhaps had brought back some old secret. The younger folks guessed it was a hidden solar cell beneath the eaves. Thomas offered no explanation. He simply said that the light was enough so that a passerby would know a door was open. One early autumn evening, little Ellie, a fifth grader, came home late from the library. The sky was dry, and the chill sharper than usual. The path from Main Street to her home went through a dark stretch between two rows of birch trees. At that spot, Ellie slowed because of a water channel left over from rainy season. She couldn't see clearly. In the hesitation, she saw at the end of Willow Street a faint streak of light, not glaring, standing still, like a kind eye. It was the lantern on Thomas's porch. Its light traced a thin line on the ground, just enough to show the edge of the channel and the patch of higher dry soil. Ellie followed the line of light, crossed the channel, crossed the dew-wet grass, then stopped under the porch to catch her breath. Thomas opened the door, asked nothing, handed her a moss-green ceramic mug of warm water. Ellie said, "Thank you." Her cold fingers pressing against the mug felt pleasing. She looked closer at the lantern saw inside the old metal shade. No flame flickering. Only a calm zone of light hovered as though breathing quietly. After that night, whenever she passed the birch row, Ellie just needed to remember that light, and her steps slowed, and her heart beat less fast. Another night, a man in a gray raincoat stopped on the porch as the mist began to fall. He introduced himself as Adam said he was a traveler from afar. Adam asked if he might sit under the lantern a while to review a map of the forest trail. Thomas invited him onto the porch, pulled the lantern closer, asked if he was hungry. Adam said he did not need food, only to know which direction was safe for taking the shortcut, while dawn was still faint. He unfolded a worn paper map. In the lantern's glow, the thin trails looked like the veins of a sleeping creature. Thomas pointed out little black dots marking rock edges and said if the ground was dry, the feet would be light. But if heavy mist or night rain came, then the soil would grip thickly, making shoes heavy as though carrying lead. Adam sat still and listened. Folded, the map decided to wait until morning. Thomas gave him a thin blanket smelling of sunshine. All night, the lantern stood still like a gentle gatekeeper for a short sleep. In the morning, Adam touched the porch post, whispered a small "thank you," then headed toward the forest. Thomas lifted the lantern from its hook, wiped the metal shade, and tucked the wooden box back on the shelf, as though storing a breath. Late one winter day, the power went out. The entire town went dark, as if someone had pulled a wide hat over the sky. The diner on the corner of Main Street closed early, and more people paused on Thomas's porch. There was Mrs. Nora, who brought a basket of wool to knit a scarf for her grandchild. There was Mr. Ben, the postman, who brought his jacket with torn elbow for a quick mend. The lantern's light was enough for such small tasks. Thomas sat by the door from time to time, shielding the breeze so the light would not flicker too much across the cloth. No one spoke loudly. People worked in their own quiet, heard the sound of a car on the highway far off, like hearing waves from an old sea brushing a shore seldom visited. When the electricity returned, the neighbors' lights came on in a rush. The lantern on Thomas's porch remained still. People said good night to each other. Some even said good night to the lantern before saying good night to the homeowner. Time passed in Cedar Creek like a still stream. Old faces faded, like pictures placed by the window. New faces brightened and gradually became familiar. Only the porch lantern remained little changed. In spring, it carried the scent of pollen. In summer, insects fluttered close. In autumn, dry leaves rolled in circles at its feet. In winter, its warmth seemed thicker, as if it understood that hands resting nearby sought a bit of peace. Thomas grew old. His steps slower, but his motion of lifting the lamp remained as steady as the first time. One evening, a young woman wearing a gray beanie arrived at the porch as daylight faded. She said her name was Ava. Her voice was calm, but her eyes still bore the tiny drops of a rainstorm inside. She said she needed to cross the woods that night to catch the late-night bus at the North Stop. Thomas looked at her shoes, looked at the wet road, then invited her to sit. He brought out a hand-drawn map whose ink was faded along the folds. He pointed to County Road 12, winding around the foot of the hill, a longer path, but with Mr. Reed's house in the middle of the stretch if she needed help. Ava listened quietly, her hands resting on her knees. After a moment, she exhaled slowly, as though she had just put down a sack of stones. She said she would take the longer route. Before she left the porch, she asked why the lantern shone without fire. Thomas only said that some things shine because they have been near darkness long enough to learn how to stand still. The answer made Ava smile slightly. She thanked him and left. The light followed her a short distance, like a seasoned hand laid on the shoulder of a young person learning to move forward. That storm season, a wind from the sea blew into the mountains. The sky turned dark very fast. Old pines shrieked in the wind. Rain fell in thick sheets. The dirt road at the end of Willow Street became a dark streak. The porch lantern did not flicker. It stood in the wind like a learner taking steady breaths, trying to maintain calm for the whole porch. In the storm, things named and unnamed mixed together. The creak of a wooden step met the pounding hammer of water. When the storm left, the sky seemed as if someone had wiped it clean. On the porch, a few wet maple leaves stuck. Thomas used a cloth to blot the water off the lampshade and placed it back in its accustomed spot. At the corner of the road, the old oak had lost a large branch. The next morning, townsfolk passed by, each pausing a little on the porch, as though wanting to check a shared heartbeat. They saw the light was still there. They nodded and moved on. No one called its name, but everyone understood that the town had just passed through a worry, and what remained was the simple sign of peace. A veteran named Marcus moved to Cedar Creek after many years away. At night, he found it hard to sleep sitting indoors, watching the shadow of the tree fall on the wall. One evening, he walked out to the street, stopped under Thomas's porch. He stood at the edge of the light for a long time. Then he moved closer. He asked if he could sit a while. Thomas pulled out a wooden chair, placed it near the lamp post. Marcus sat, breathed evenly, gazed into the steady glow of the lampshade. He told how he heard sounds no one else did. They sprang up in the night and did not stop on command. Thomas nodded, quietly, did not interrupt. He said that when he was young and worked on the stage between scenes, he had to let the room become completely dark before turning on the lights, because if you flipped on the lights too fast, the actors would be blinded. He said thoughts inside the head are like that too. They need a period of darkness long enough for the eyes to get accustomed to shadows. Marcus smiled softly at the simple way of speaking. After a while, he stood up. He looked at the lantern, like looking at a nameless teacher. That night, he slept for the first time in a long string of sleepless nights. In summer, the children set up a lemonade stand at the corner of Main Street. They hung a handwritten sign. It was hot, and customers passed by frequently. By late afternoon, when the sun tilted, the kids packed up and ran laughing to the end of Willow Street. The quickest one insisted on hiding just at the edge of the woods in a game of hide and seek. Near the tree line, it heard the rustle of leaves, like someone quietly calling. It turned around, and saw the glow from the porch lantern stretched all the way to its feet. It changed its mind, hid immediately behind the rose bush in front of the house. The other kids ran through, looking for it everywhere. No one expected one of them to hide so close to the light. The game ended with laughter. The whole bunch sat on the porch steps, swinging their legs. Thomas poured lemonade for each of them. They looked into the lampshade, trying to guess the secret. Thomas shrugged. The kids did not need to know. They only needed to remember, if the night gets too dark, walk toward the nearest light. A new music teacher moved into town. Her name was Claire. On Sunday nights, she often sat on her own porch playing guitar. One night, she brought her instrument over to Thomas's porch. She asked for permission to sit by the light and play a few songs. Thomas nodded and pulled up an extra chair. Claire played a slow, low melody, like the sound of water beneath stones. The music flowed into the circle of light and seemed to soften. The light did not flicker. It stood still and listened. After the third song, Claire rested her hands. She said the light made the notes feel rounder. Thomas smiled and said that sound always knows its way home when someone opens the door. From then on, she would occasionally return. Evening strollers, passing by the end of Willow Street, sometimes got to enjoy a free little concert with an audience made up of a birch tree, a wooden fence, and a flameless lantern. Another evening, the town sheriff stopped by. He stood under the porch, hat pulled low, and asked Thomas if he had seen the boy from the house over the hill run past. Thomas said he had not, but if the boy had passed through while the light was on, he would have felt less afraid. The sheriff looked at the lampshade, went quiet for a moment, then said that in other places, people use strong floodlights to push things away. But here, a small light can be enough to make someone stay. Thomas said that pushing away and holding close are just two gestures of the same fear. The sheriff nodded, thanked him, and left. Winter came. In the mornings, people's breath appeared in smoky clouds. A thin layer of ice traced clear lines along the porch rail. The flameless light still glowed as it did every night. One evening, the snow came early. Children threw powdery snowballs. Adults shoveled their walkways. That night, a deer wandered into the yard. It paused under the porch, eyes glowing like two dark drops of water. The lantern reflected in its eyes as two tiny stars. It stood still for a while, then turned away. Its footprints in the snow looked like quiet punctuation marks. The next morning, Ellie followed those tracks and drew her own map on paper, naming it the way home of someone who cannot read. In all those days, no one asked anymore why the lantern shone. People grew used to a kind of secret that needed no explanation. They knew that if it was too late or too exhausting or just too much, they could walk to the end of Willow Street, stop under the porch, sip some warm water, breathe a little slower, and then move on. Thomas grew older. He replaced the lampshade, once the hanging hook once, and repainted the porch post. The lantern still stood there, like an answer that used no words. Then, a piece of sad news passed through town. The lighthouse keeper at the old coastal station, where Thomas's grandfather once worked, had passed away. Thomas traveled to attend the memorial. That night, with him away, people noticed the porch at the end of Willow Street was dark. They felt uneasy. At 8 o'clock, Ellie arrived holding a small flashlight. Ben brought a storm lantern. Claire came with a scented candle. The sheriff showed up with spare batteries. They placed those little sources of light on the porch steps. They flickered, weak and uncertain, but when placed close together, they were warm enough. The whole town, all at once, understood what a flameless lantern really meant. It was not about some secret technology. It was about how when one person is gone, those who remain know how to stand close enough for the light to take shape. That night felt warmer than it needed to. Thomas returned the following afternoon. He saw the dried wax on the wooden steps, the leftover tape marks, and a child's flashlight still working. He hung the lantern back on its hook. That evening, it glowed as it always had, but from that day on, he understood more clearly why he had never used a regular bulb. It was not out of old habit. It was because he wanted the light to breathe like a person. And from that day on, those who passed the porch rarely just walked by. They paused for a moment, as if stopping in front of a small mirror to see whether they had been moving too fast. In that mirror, there was no face, only the way they were breathing. If there is one lesson to take from the flameless lantern at the end of Willow Street, perhaps it is this. Sometimes life asks us questions using darkness. It does not ask with words. It asks with stretches of road, without signs, with quiet living rooms, with eyes still wet from something that has just been lost. In those moments, we do not need a blinding light to chase the night away. We need a glow close enough to stand beside. That light does not need fire or reason or a name. It just needs to be there. And when there is a place in town that is always there, like that, people learn how to be there for one another. Those who are far away learn how to look at the map and wait for dawn. Those who return learn how to sit still, one more beat before opening their front door. Those who are hurting learn how to breathe with the dark instead of fighting it. And when they leave the porch to continue their path, each person carries something unseen in their hand. It is the habit of placing light in the right spot, in a spot that is enough, but no more, in a spot where someone will surely walk by, in a spot where a child can step across a shallow ditch without needing to name their fear. When a town knows how to place light, like that peace is no longer a promise. It becomes an act repeated every evening through a flameless lantern and through countless hearts that have chosen to stand still in order to shine together. The story of 3 windows on the hill. The house sits on a small hill overlooking the west of the town of Ashbury. The drive up the hill is paved with white gravel, winding between 2 rows of birch trees. From the foot of the hill, looking up, you can easily spot the house by a single detail, a large window facing the sunset, where every afternoon a beam of light pours in slow and steady as the breath of the day about to end. The locals call it the window on the hill, not because of its architecture, but because the light from it seems to have a soul. The owner of the house is a woman named Grace. She is around 40, formerly a copy editor at a major city newspaper, then quit her job and moved here to live alone. People say she left after her husband died in a highway accident. For the next 2 years, Grace hardly spoke. She bought the old teacher's house, renovated every part, the walls painted cream, the wooden frames re-stained with the scent of pine, and the large window was replaced with the clearest glass she could find. Every morning, Grace sits by the window with a cup of peppermint tea and a blank notebook. She writes a few lines and then stops. Some days, she writes only 3 words. Today, peaceful. She never writes anything more. When the morning light floods the floor, she sets down the pen, closes the notebook, and goes out into the garden. Her life is so simple, so quiet, as if she is training herself to again hear the beating of her own heart. One early autumn afternoon, when the sky was so clear, you could see specks of dust floating in the sunlight. Grace saw a small figure walking up the slope. It was a 12-year-old boy named Henry, whose house is at the foot of the hill. Henry, curious by nature, often rides his bike around collecting unusual stones. That day, he stood outside the wooden fence and called up, "Ma'am, why is your window always open?" Grace looked out, smiled, replied, "Because if you close it, you will not hear the wind." The boy was silent, nodded, then asked, "But what is there in the wind to hear?" Grace did not answer. She opened the door onto the porch, handed Henry a small oatmeal cookie. He accepted it, thanked her, and from that time on, every week, once he would drop by her house. Henry began to enjoy sitting by that window. Some days, he brought his wooden flute, sat, and played short melodies he invented himself. The window was like a quiet audience. The flute's sound mingled with the wind, the leaves rustle, and the little wind chime hanging by the frame, forming a tune nobody could remember the melody of. Grace listened, made no comment, merely smiled. Once, Henry asked, "Are you sad?" She said, "Sadness is also a kind of wind, Henry. If we open the window, the wind passes through, it does not stay. But if we close it, it will swirl inside the house forever." That answer stayed with Henry for a long time. He told his mother, then his friends, but only Grace knew that she was not talking only about sadness. She was talking about the memories that weighed on her heart. For many years, she lived like a guardian of the window of her soul, neither closed nor pushed, wide open too fast. On a winter night, the wind blew hard, the sky a deep velvet blue. Grace sat by the window, a desk lamp shining on the blank page. On the hill, far away, the lights of other houses were already off. She saw her reflection on the glass overlaying the scene outside. In that moment, she suddenly realized that darkness is not the opposite of light. It is just the remainder of the light after passing through everything else. One day in March, a man knocked on her door. He was a photographer passing through town to shoot landscapes. He asked permission to photograph the house, especially the window. Grace agreed. While he set up his camera, he asked, "What made you choose this direction for the window?" Grace replied, "Because every afternoon, the light from that direction moves the slowest." He nodded, then fell silent. When he developed the first picture, he sent it to Grace along with a caption, "A window open to the inside." Time passed. Grace began to write more in her notebook. Not articles, not journal entries, just small recorded sentences. Today, the scent of orange in the wind. This afternoon, Henry said he will go to another school to learn music. The light in the house across the hill turned off early. These notes, when read aloud, sound like the whispers of a person returning to life after a long sleep. In summer, Grace hung a string of small lights around the window frame. The yellow light fell on the porch steps like lazy letters. Some evenings, people walking through town glanced up and saw that window lit, and their hearts softened. They called it the breathing window, even though no one ever heard it breathe. Many years later, When Grace left Ashbury to live with her sister in another state, the house on the hill was sold to a young family. The buyers repaired the roof, repainted the walls, but kept the window unchanged. On their first night there, the little girl said that she heard a flute in the wind. Her mother smiled, said it must be imagination. But down at the foot of the hill, Henry, now grown up and teaching music at the high school, stood looking up, and he heard the same faint sound, like a strand of longing returning. The hill is still there. The afternoon light still passes through the window as an old habit of the sun. In the new room, people placed a desk beside the window. Whenever the wind comes in, the papers on the desk gently flutter as if someone is still writing an unfinished sentence. If there is one thing the window on the hill wishes to tell the world, perhaps it is this: people cannot avoid the winds of loss, but we can learn how to let them pass through. Sometimes, instead of shutting everything out for fear of the wind, we just need to open a small crack so that light has the chance to enter with it. The things that once hurt us when seen through a different frame can also become a sunset, gentle, slow, and no longer frightening. Each of us carries a window like that inside a place where light and shadow meet without conflict. If we are quiet enough to see it, we will realize peace is not when there is no wind, but when we know how to keep the window open. The story of 4 clocks in the town hall lobby. The town hall lobby sat at the junction of 3 small roads. One road led out to the lake, another wound into the Maplewood forest, and the third passed through a quiet residential area with white-painted porches. The red brick building dated from the early 20th century. Its facade featured a worn stone staircase, polished smooth by the heels of many generations. At the top of the bell tower was a clock with a white enamel face, black hands, and large numerals easily seen from the far end of the street. At every hour, the bell tolled slowly, 3 times enough for someone busy in the garden to pause and hear a long, slow breath. The clock keeper was Mr. Samuel. Everyone simply called him Sam. He used to work as a mechanic in the railway workshop, which has now closed. His eyes were kind, his forehead broad. He spoke little, but was approachable. Every morning, he walked from his small wooden house on Maple Street to the town hall lobby, entered through the side door, climbed the spiral stairs to the little attic room under the roof. There, the clock mechanism sat on an old iron frame painted blue. The smell of oil and metal dust blending with the dry wood scent of the attic's rafters. Sam wiped down the axles, dripped oil onto cams, listened to the steady tick-tock. He listened as if he were hearing the heartbeat of a longtime friend. In the town, there was Miss Nora, who worked at the library, a high school boy, Ethan, the bakery owner, Mrs. Margaret, the mail carrier, Ben, the music teacher, Miss Claire, who lived on Willow Street. Each had their own reason to love the clock. Nora said the bell made her think of the time for closing the books, helping her avoid staying too late at work. Ethan used it as his meeting time cue by the basketball court. Ben listened for the bell to measure how far his mail round stretched each day. Claire said the sound was rich and round, like a low major note. And Margaret, well, she kept it simple. She started the bakery oven when the bell struck, if the sky was still gray and she couldn't see the sun. One early winter morning, snow fell lightly like powdered sugar. The town was quieter than ever. Sam arrived at the machinery room earlier than usual. He wound the clock and heard the mainspring tightening. As he closed the cover, a tiny squeal came from one of the axles. The squeal sounded like the complaint of an old knee joint. Sam tilted his head, turned on the lamp, inspected carefully, but saw nothing unusual. He cleaned oil from a crease, checked the latch. Everything appeared okay. He descended the worn steps, now slick with snow, stepped out, and looked up at the clock face. The seconds hand was moving slowly and steadily. He reassured himself, walked past Margaret's bakery, and picked up an apple pie to have for lunch. By midday, Nora closed the library for lunch and sat by the window, looking out at the tower clock. She suddenly realized the minute hand was standing still. She watched for a while. It did not move. She stood up, put on her coat, and hurried to the lobby. Sam was waiting at the side door when Nora arrived. He too had noticed the unusual stillness in the air. They climbed the spiral stairs together. In the machinery room, the clock was silent. The tick-tock had vanished like an underground stream, retreating into a hidden cavern. Sam opened the protective cover, probed each axle. He found a bearing deeply worn at the edge of a narrow groove. In that place, the metal was dry. The oil had run out. Perhaps the morning he had not oiled it quite enough because the light was dim. He told Nora they must stop the clock for repairs. Word that the clock had stopped spread quickly. Ethan stood by the high school basketball court, looked up at the tower, and frowned. From his childhood, he had never experienced a noon without the bell. Ben delivered mail in near silence, feeling it unfamiliar. Claire no longer had a time marker to end her afternoon class. Margaret stood by her oven, guessing the time with an old kitchen clock, uncertain of the rhythm. The town felt like a room missing its familiar wall clock. No one panicked or clamored. There was just a subtle lack of the beat that told you where you were in the day. Sam placed a cloth over the mechanism, removed the bearing. He drove his small truck to the neighboring town to find a spare part. The shopkeeper looked at the sample and shook his head, saying this kind of part was seldom used nowadays. Sam bought a matching bearing, took it home, and patiently filed it for a proper fit. He worked into the evening. Nora brought coffee. Margaret brought a savory pastry. Ben dropped by with an unaddressed letter he kept in his pocket for warmth, then offered to everyone as a joke. They chatted quietly in the wind blowing outside the stone steps. Sam replaced the bearing, cleaned off the old oil poured in new oil. When he wound the mainspring and nudged the axle, the seconds hand trembled a beat, then stopped. Sam did not fret. He waited. He made a thin adjustment to a small steel leaf spring. This time, the seconds hand advanced. The tick-tock returned quiet, but present. The next morning, the clock was silent again. Sam returned to the attic room as if on a night shift. He discovered the mainspring was scratched lengthwise, likely by an overwinding a season ago. It would need replacing. He took out his phone and called around. A vintage workshop in a distant city still kept that kind of mainspring in stock. They agreed to send it, but it would take several days. Sam sat down on the wooden chair, gazed up at the ceiling, and exhaled. He went downstairs and told Nora. She nodded and said people would just live a little slower for a while. The days when the clock rested felt like a gentle trial for the town. Students asked their teacher the time by the old classroom wall clock. The East Side church bell suddenly became a time marker for many West Side homes. The diner served the midday soup a little later. Ben delivered by the feel of his legs. Claire ended class when her arm got a little weary instead of relying on a number. People in the town talked to each other slowly and longer while standing by the stone steps. They told again of the days with the clock and the days without tick-tock. An older gentleman said that in his youth he had lived in a place without a clock. People measured the length of day by the tree's shadow and the sound of the fields. Ethan heard this and thought he had never learned how to read a tree shadow to know the hour. On Tuesday afternoon, a small snowstorm came unexpectedly. The roads were slippery wind whipped across the face. Sam stayed home, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the wind like a distant wave roar. He thought about the silent clock. He wondered if maybe he had been too determined to keep time running smoothly, forgetting that sometimes it needs a rest. He remembered when his wife died of illness. In the weeks that followed, he found all the clocks in the house too noisy. He removed batteries and let them be silent. He lived those long days like blank sheets. Now, as the tower clock stopped, those old memories opened like a little door. He was not sad. He just understood that sometimes silence is a kind of maintenance everyone needs. On Wednesday morning, the storm passed. The sky was clear. The package arrived. Sam carried the new mainspring up to the attic room. He installed it in the mechanism, wound it gently, oiled the gears, checked each wheel. Nora stood in the courtyard below, looking up, coffee mug in hand. Ethan arrived, pushing his bicycle up the steps. Margaret brought a scarf for Sam. Ben placed his mailbag on the step, folded his arms. Claire arrived late with a music book. When Sam finished, he turned and looked at his friends, standing below through the small window. He smiled, then wound the clock for the first time. The tick-tock began at first timid, then more regular. The minute hand moved slightly. After 10 minutes, everything ran normally. Sam stood still and listened. He did not rush down. He waited another 100 beats. When he descended to the final step, the first bell of the hour, after many days, rang out. The town paused for a moment. The bell traveled through the street like a warm breeze. People standing near the stone steps smiled at each other without saying a word. The clock began running again, but the town did not return to the way it was. Something had changed very slightly. Nora still listened for the bell to close the books, but she allowed herself an extra 5 minutes, sitting alone before locking the door. Ethan still arranged to meet his friends at the basketball court, but on some days, he walked his bike home, watching the tree's shadow stretch across the gravel road. Ben delivered the mail, not exactly on the minute, but exactly in the moment, when a person met another on a porch. Claire ended her class when the whole group exhaled in unison. Margaret pulled the oven toward the ding of the bell, but added the habit of looking at the color of the light beyond the door. Sam continued his work, but he climbed the stairs differently. He climbed slowly, his hand on the banister, as if greeting a friend. On each step, he heard the tick-tock, as if footsteps passing inside a large house. One afternoon, Ethan went up the tower with Sam. He asked to see how the mechanism operated. Sam pointed to the big gear, the small axle, the spring, the oil ports, how to tension, and how to release. He asked why the clock needed a person. Sam said, because everything needs someone willing to listen. He asked if after Sam, there would be someone to come up here. Sam paused a moment. He said maybe it would be his grandson. Ethan laughed and said, not for a long time, but in his eyes, a question had changed into a small promise. At the beginning of spring, the town held an outdoor concert. Claire invited a group of students to play music in front of the staircase to the hall. The townspeople brought folding chairs and sat. Children ran around. When the sun sank low, golden light spread over the paving stones. The bell marking the hour merged with the music in a strange chord. A little girl, standing beside her mother, asked whose music the bell was. The mother said it was the bell of the clock. The girl asked whether the clock felt tired. The mother said maybe it did. The girl pondered, then waved toward the tower, as if greeting someone who knew how to smile. In summer, more tourists stopped by. They took photos of the clock, posted them online, complimented how charming the town was. Some asked Sam about the history of the mechanism. He told just enough, not in detail. He did not mention the period when the clock stopped, not out of shame, but because he viewed it as a part of silence to be respected. People asked Sam how he knew when the mechanism needed to rest. He replied by extending his hand out the window toward the lake. On the water, there were small ripples. He said, when the lake is too still for too long, it often means rain is coming. When the clock is silent, perhaps someone is about to need the sound of silence before they hear the tick-tock again. In September, Ethan entered his final year of high school. He chose a science project to build a simple mechanical clock model. He learned how to file the axle place bearings, apply oil, install the spring, adjust the tension so that the beat was even. He failed on twice, 3 times. On the 4th time, the model ran. He brought it up for Sam to see. Sam praised him for oiling the right spots. He said he had learned the trick of listening to the sound instead of just looking. Sam nodded. He said, "Sound is the invisible part, but the most honest." One early winter evening, the wind ran long down the valley. House lights came on sooner. Sam stepped onto the porch, looked up at the clock. The tick-tock balanced and slow. He thought of the people relying on this sound to carry them through a day in rhythm. He thought of the days the clock was silent and the town found another beat. He understood that both were needed. The clock must run, and people must know how to stop. He locked the hall door, put on his hat, walked across to Margaret's bakery. She was placing trays of buns on the rack. She said the bell sounded warm today. He smiled and said maybe it was not the bell that was different, but his ears. One Sunday, the town held a cleanup of the hall's forecourt. Everyone swept leaves, repainted the banister, planted more flowers in the troughs out front. Ellie brought lemonade for everyone. Claire played a short piece so the younger kids could learn to listen to the beat. Ben told an old story from when he first became a postman, his own lost letter. Nora opened a little book market right on the stairs. Sam stood at the door, a cloth in hand, watching it all as if observing a living machine. Each person a gear, each smile a drop of oil. The hour bell rang and dissolved across the rooftops. At the end of the day, when the sun touched the forest's edge, everyone sat and rested. Ethan asked Sam how much longer the clock would run. Sam replied, "Longer than my lifetime, if someone keeps coming up here to listen." Ethan was silent. He looked up at the sky, changing color, and the clock lighting up against the dusk. He knew his town was not big, not noisy, but rich in steady beats. Looking back on the days when the clock stopped, everyone realized something. No one spoke aloud. Time is measured not only by hands and numbers. Time is measured by how we are present and how we listen. When the clock is silent, we hear the sound of our home. The child's foot on the floor, the spoon hitting the bowl, the neighbor dragging a chair on the porch. When the clock runs again, we also hear these sounds, but with a different gratitude. We know everything is moving forward, but we do not have to hurry. We know the clock can rest and still be a clock, just as we can stop and still be ourselves. The clock in the town hall continues running through the seasons, through lives. It has days of strength, days of fatigue. It needs oil. It needs a person's hand. It needs a person's ears. The town is the same. There are weeks of energy, weeks of quiet. There are summer evenings when Maple Street is empty, save the wind. There are summer nights when children do not want to go home, just run around beneath the stairs. But through it all, the hour bell remains a common beat for everyone to pause and remember that there is a home for all. If one lesson can be drawn from the story of the clock in the town hall, perhaps it is this: treat time as Sam treated the mechanism. Listen before adjusting. Put oil in the right place instead of forcing a stuck gear. Accept days when the machine needs to rest for maintenance. When our life is rocky, instead of forcing ourselves to run faster, let us try sitting quietly inside a still room and listen where the tick-tock within has gone off. When we feel tired, it is not a sign of failure. It is a small letter from the body saying the spring is too tight. We may loosen it a bit. We may let the bell be silent for a day. Then, when we are ready, we wind up again and step on. No need to hurry. Time does not demand that we beat it. Time only invites us to walk with it, like the bell inviting the town to breathe in and out each hour. When we learn to walk with it like that, we do not lose anything at all, and instead, we pick up the most precious thing. That is our presence in each soft and full moment. The story of 5 clouds that refused to rain. The desert on the northern edge of New Mexico stretched out like a pale golden cloth with brown stitching of old stream beds. In the distance were low, gray-blue mountains. Sagebrush stood still, as though listening. In the afternoon, the sun fell slowly, and the light became thick as honey toward the end of summer. In the wide sky, there was a single white cloud standing apart from the thin ribbons of other clouds. It stood so still that looking up from below, you might think the sky had forgotten to breathe. The old shepherd paused, leaned his chin on his staff, squinted upward. The children from the mobile home community by Highway 84 pointed to the sky and silently counted how long it would take for that cloud to drop rain. No one realized that the cloud itself was counting the faint pulses in its heart. People called this region Mesa del Cielo, the sky's table. Nearby, there was a small town named Arroyo Creek, where on weekends there was a farmer's market, cornbread loaves, and jars of amber-colored honey lined up on the stalls. Maya had moved to the town just 3 months ago. She worked part-time at the library and helped her younger brother Jonah watch the stall every Saturday. The 2 siblings rented a low wooden house on the outskirts of town next to a trail leading into the dry valley land. Each afternoon, Maya would walk to a low rock outcrop overlooking the desert. There, the wind blew gently from the southwest, carrying the scent of pine resin mixed with hot earth. Maya sat on a flat slab of rock, placed her notebook on her knees, and wrote a few lines. On the first day she arrived, she wrote that the sky in this place seemed too wide for someone who carried many things still unnamed. The cloud stood over Mesa del Cielo from noon until evening. It was round and thick, its outer edge ragged like an old wool sweater. Cold air layers beneath had lifted it. The damp strands wove together and grew heavier, but every time it came close to the threshold of falling, the cloud pulled itself back as though afraid of loss. It remembered the drops of water that once fell and vanished into the ground. It thought about how, if it were to fall, it would dissolve. It would no longer be a form. Up here it had shape. It had shadow. It had the integrity that the human eye could see and point to. It had grown used to that feeling, so much so that it forgot the sensation of relief that comes from letting go. Maya observed that cloud for many consecutive days. At the library, she read an old article saying that this region once had a strangely persistent rainy season. The dry streams suddenly filled. Wild sunflowers bloomed into golden carpets, and children swam in puddles on the red earth plain, as though in a dream that had never been allowed. The article included a photo of a cloud over Mesa del Cielo, identical to the cloud of today. She folded the article, thought that perhaps the sky also had memory. Then she wondered whether that memory ever caused a cloud to fear falling, much like a person might fear crying, because they are afraid their voice will break, afraid their tears will not stop when they should. At the Saturday farmers' market, Jonah set out jars of honey on the table. An elderly woman stopped, asked which garden the honey came from. Jonah pointed to the mountains, said it was from Mr. Hank's place, 10 miles away. The woman bought 2 jars, then looked up at the sky and asked if it would rain today. Maya glanced up. The cloud was still there, silent, like a period put at the end of an unfinished sentence. The woman smiled, said that when she was young, she once climbed up Mesa del Cielo. After a night of rain, saw on the ground the streaks of water winding like the written lines of someone's hurried note. She said those water paths would eventually dry, but if you read them at the right moment, you would know where to walk so as not to get lost. Her words were like a faint thread fastening themselves inside Maya's heart. She nodded, thanked her, and looked back at the cloud, which now seemed longer than usual. That afternoon, Maya climbed up to the rock outcrop. The cloud was a little lower. Its shadow fell across the red earth ribbon as a gentle gray streak. She leaned her back against the rock slab, inhaled slowly, watched the thin veins of the cloud stretch outward from within, like the blood vessels of a creature hesitating. In her mind were lists and deadlines and unpaid bills. She saw herself like that cloud, holding back, gathering in not yet wanting anything to fall, because she was afraid that if she let go, she would stop being herself. She gave a tired smile. She wondered whether a cloud could hear a person breathe. Then she suddenly noticed on the ground, among the pebbles, an ant dragging a leaf piece many times larger than its body. It pulled, paused, then pulled again. The leaf lifted a little off the ground, then touched down, then lifted again. Maya watched a long time, as though a lesson had been intentionally shrunk, so no one had an excuse to skip it. That night, the wind from the northeast shifted direction. The clouds backed away toward the mountain's edge. It saw below itself the long shadows of the pine trees cast on the slope like fingers. It heard the sand trickle into the cracks of the earth. It remembered past times when it allowed itself to fall. The first drops fell cold, and light touched the ground and leapt up wet specks of dust. Some drops landed on the face of a child lying on its back, and the child laughed because the sky touched it. Some drops fell on the tin roof, creating an orchestra with no conductor. Some drops entered the old stream crevices, and the stream awakened its voice. Those memories warmed it. But immediately after, a fear ran along its body. When it dissolves, will it still be itself? At home, Jonah finished washing the dishes and asked Maya if she would take her brother out to the big town tomorrow to buy accessories for their booth. Maya hesitated. She said, maybe next week. Jonah frowned and said she had postponed so many things. Maya was silent. She knew he was right. There were things she held back, not because she had not had time, but because she had not dared. After Jonah went to sleep, Maya went out onto the porch. The sky was dark, but lightened by the faint Milky Way. She looked toward Mesa del Cielo. The cloud was a dark mass in the night. She placed her hand on her chest and measured her heartbeat. That heartbeat was like footsteps on a long hallway. No one walked. She remembered the times she had not cried, had held back, even when necessary. She understood that part of her was afraid of dissolving, so she clutched the drops at the corner of her eyes, like a small bag containing her own name. The next morning, Maya went to work at the library. A boy brought back overdue books, timidly placed them on the counter, and said sorry. Maya smiled and said it was all right. The boy looked out the window and said the sky seemed to be holding its breath. Maya followed his gaze. The cloud was thicker now, the edge grayer. She stamped the book covers, suddenly wanting to write something in the margin. She did not write, but in her mind she held this simple sentence: sometimes falling is the kindest thing we can do for the world. In the afternoon, Maya invited Jonah to walk along the trail leading to Mesa del Cielo. They carried a bottle of water and 2 apples. The path up was not steep, but dry. Fine dust clung to their shoes and pant cuffs. At the high edge, the wind opened before them like a large door. The cloud hovered right overhead. It was large enough to cover part of the town and the patch of sagebrush fields below their feet. Maya stood still so long that Jonah had to ask if she was okay. She nodded her eyes, never leaving the cloud. She told Jonah about the old newspaper article about the streams that once filled, like a sleeping story waking up. Jonah listened, hands in his shirt pockets, saying if it rains, maybe this Saturday, they'll sell more honey. They both laughed, but their longing was not in the jars of honey. It was in something very simple, wanting to hear the roof talking with the rain. The strange thing was that the closer to sunset, the more motionless the cloud became. The sun dropped lower, slicing a streak of orange on the cloud's rim, making it look like a little mountain that knew how to fly. The wind blew steadily, but the cloud did not drift. Maya closed her eyes and imagined herself sitting inside the cloud. In there, everything was white and light. She saw strands of water twisting around each other like sentences not yet spoken. She understood that the cloud's fear of falling was similar to a person's fear of living truly. Falling means losing shape. Living truly means losing a mask. Both are ways of letting go of an old form in order to become part of something bigger. Night came, and they returned home. Before going in, Maya looked up once more. The cloud had drifted slightly north. No one knew that in its belly, the drops had begun to grow heavy. The small convection lines drew in and then burst outward like hesitant hands. From the ground, she heard a dog barking far away from a farm, a truck rolling on the smooth asphalt road, a man laughing softly in a backyard because a joke came out late. She heard the breath of the night, and among those sounds, she heard something very private, a girl whispering that she was ready. The next morning, the sky was dim, the air like it had been drawn from a cold porcelain vase. Maya got up early, made mint tea, and went to the porch. Jonah was still sleeping. She took a sip. The steam made her eyes sting slightly. She looked up at the sky. The cloud was lower now. Its edges began thinning at some spots. She smiled for no reason. She picked up the notebook she had neglected for many days, opened it, and wrote a few lines. She wrote that today it might rain. Then she added a sentence, even if it does not rain, she will call and schedule the appointment with the place where she wants to apply for a full-time job. She breathed slowly, listened to her heart like an old friend walking up to sit beside her. At noon, the sky darkened as if someone drew a thin curtain. The cloud suddenly seemed to sigh. The first drops fell without warning. They were not heavy. They were like little dots from a pen testing ink on paper. The dusty earth smelled sweet. A brown sparrow on a power line fluttered its wings, tilted its head. Children shouted and ran out into the yard with arms wide. The wheels of a neighbor's truck turned through a thin sheet of water, leaving a smear, like a long smile. Jonah came out of the house and stood next to Maya. Neither said anything. The rain increased. The scent of sagebrush rose in a wave. The old earth crevices suddenly filled with voices. The tin roof taps a steady rhythm. The drops grew larger. Then a proper streak of rain swept across Mesa del Cielo. It did not last long. It was just enough. In the afternoon, after the rain, we see the things that are usually hidden. On the dirt road, footprints become clear. On the old stone surface, tiny veins appeared like a hidden map. The green grass budded right before our eyes, as if someone pressed the on button somewhere beneath the earth. The birds preened their feathers as if preparing for a sunset concert. Maya went out to the rock ledge, looked at the recently washed sky. The cloud had thinned, completely, almost gone. But in that thinness, it had not disappeared. It had become part of the earth, part of the seed, part of the scent, part of the laughter. It was present in a different way. Evening fell, and Maya and Jonah closed the booth earlier than usual. They walked through the main street. The corner diner played soft music. The chairs on the porch held collected drops of water. The old folks sat drinking coffee, their hands resting on the table, looking like they held a story unwilling to drift away. The sheriff walked by and waved. The woman selling cornbread cleaned her glass case, laughed loudly when she saw Maya. Everyone said the rain came at just the right time. No one mentioned the cloud, but everyone thanked it, as if they thanked someone who chose just the right words when speaking. That night, Maya sat by the window. She placed her phone on the table, the screen set to remind her to call the recruitment place tomorrow. She opened the notebook, wrote another sentence she had been afraid of falling for far too long. She snapped the notebook shut, leaned her head against the window frame. The sky was dark, but down low, the puddles held stars. She saw herself in a puddle like that, no longer forced to look perfect at all times, only transparent enough to reflect a little light. She pursed her lips and smiled. In the house next door, someone played a very slow tune on the guitar. She heard it like hearing someone walk alongside her, saying nothing, just being there. The next day, the cloud no longer held its shape. It had separated into thin bands, drifting eastward. The desert brightened after a short sleep. The early wild sunflowers lifted their heads. Thin streaks of water began to draw new lines across the red soil. Maya submitted her application. She thought of a small letter slipping into someone's mailbox, and through it, her life shifting another step forward. When she pressed the send button, her heart pounded and then settled like a cloud that had just decided to fall. If there is anything to keep from the story of the cloud over Mesa del Cielo, perhaps it is this: not all forms of wholeness are worth holding on to at all costs. Some versions of wholeness are merely the shape others see and praise. When we fear falling, we cling to that shape so tightly we forget what water knows very well, that only by falling can it become drinkable. Only by letting go can it reach the roots of trees, the mouths of springs, the hands that are waiting. A person does not disappear when letting go of a name or an image. A person changes form to become part of something wider, just like the cloud did not die in the rain. It remained in 1,000 ways, in the scent of the soil, in the flower that stood up, in the laughter of children, in the nod of a passerby who says the wind feels cool tonight, and in the girl who finally dared to pick up the phone and make an appointment with the life she truly wanted. The story 6 Midnight Laundromats on Birch Street. In a small town nestled between two gentle hills, Birch Street runs from the post office all the way to the shallow riverbank where children skip flat stones in summer. In the middle of the road is a row of old storefronts. A diner that has been open for 50 years still sells apple pie and weak coffee. The shoe repair shop, run by an old Italian man, opens only 3 days a week. And at the corner, where birch meets pine, sits the laundromat, Midnight. The green-painted sign has faded. The glass door has a little bell that tinkles thinly whenever someone pushes it. The owner is a 70-year-old woman named Martha. Her hair is silver and tied back simply. Her hands always smell of soap and cotton fibers. She opens at 6 in the morning and usually closes just before midnight. But the townsfolk call it the Midnight Laundromat because its quietest moment seems to come after 10 in the evening, when Birch Street has fewer cars, when the diner dims some lights, when the row of washing machines hums a steady background tune like distant waves. Olivia arrived in town at the beginning of autumn. She is 27 years old. She works part-time in the library and picks up extra hours at Miles's climbing gear shop. She rents a small room behind Mrs. Nora's house. The window looks out onto the backyard where a red maple will change color in October. Every Tuesday and Friday evening, Olivia brings her laundry basket to the Midnight Laundromat. She picks the machine at the end of the row because that corner looks out at the street. She likes to watch passers-by as if reading short lines of text drifting past the window. On her first night there, Olivia felt a little shy. The laundromat smelled of familiar fabric softener and warm metal. Martha glanced at her and nodded hello. She did not ask many questions. She pointed to the empty machine and the box of detergent already on the shelf. Olivia thanked her. She poured her clothes into the drum. A coin dropped into the slot with a crisp sound. The machine started. Water filled the drum and swirled up and down. Immediately, Olivia noticed the swirling in her mind of some of her worries subside. She sat down on the plastic chair near the door. On the table sat a basket of old magazines, a few comic books, and a thin book of poems someone had left behind. A middle-aged man walked in. His name is Miguel. He works for the town's West Side Railway maintenance crew. He carried his dusty uniform and heavy gloves. Each time the machine reached the spin cycle, he would lift his head as though he were listening to a solo instrument. He greeted Olivia with a gentle nod. He told her that he likes coming here late at night because the machine sounds help him hear less of the leftover noise from the train tracks. On another evening, a 9th grader named Harper entered the shop with a bag of blankets. Her mother works the night shift at the hospital. Harper talked with Martha more than she did her laundry. She asked all sorts of questions. Why, when people say they are homesick, they want to smell clothes dried in the sun? Why socks never seem to stay in pairs for long? Martha smiled and said, maybe because people and things each have personality. Some things like to stay together. Some things like freedom. Harper awkwardly folded the blanket. Martha showed her how to fold in the style of a flat rectangle so it would not topple on the shelf. Night gradually fell. Olivia sat quietly, listening to the machines. She noticed each machine had its own voice. The one near the door whispered. The one in the left corner was rich and steady, like breathing. The one by the wall lightly tapped its drum when it reached high spin speed. She suddenly thought if someone listened very carefully, they could guess the mood of the whole laundromat. Just like every person has their own rhythm. Lately, her rhythm had been slightly fast, not because of anything big, just many little tasks piling up like clothes in a basket, waiting to be washed. One light rain night. The doorbell rang, then quiet. An older man entered leaning on a cane. He was a retired teacher named Howard. He carried an old sweater with a coffee stain on the sleeve. He looked embarrassed. Martha said, "Bring the sweater here, and I will try." She rubbed the stain with a mixture of detergent and a little vinegar, gently scrubbed, rinsed. The coffee mark faded, then disappeared. Mr. Howard smiled like a child. He said that sweater was a gift from his wife on his first year of teaching. She passed away. He kept the sweater, like keeping a hand. Martha placed the sweater on the shelf and said it was clean now. He asked, "How much?" She shook her head. The payment was in his soft exhale when he saw the stain vanish. Olivia watched that scene with gratitude. In her heart, she had an old stain no one saw. She still washed regularly, but there was a spot that never quite came clean. That night, She did not read a magazine. She simply watched the machine drum turn, shirts rolling with each other, then separating, then spinning together again. Foam bubbles leapt to the drum wall, then dissolved. After a while, Olivia closed her eyes. She heard the rain hitting the laundromat's thin tin roof. She heard Harper telling a science test story at the table behind. She heard Miguel texting someone, saying he was on shift early morning. The sounds flowed out smoothly. She felt like a towel just wrung out of water and hung on the wooden pole under the porch. Weight reduced. Smell of breeze in. She opened her eyes. The machine had just stopped. The shop had a long table for folding clothes. The wooden surface had been smoothed by time and many hands. Olivia pulled the damp basket from the machine. Warmth rose from the freshly washed clothes like oven steam. She laid each item down, folded in rhythm, left hand fold, right hand smooth, turn, gently set aside. At first she folded, just to finish. Then she slowed down. She remembered her mother teaching her at home how to fold a t-shirt into a neat rectangle before putting it into the drawer. Not for looks, her mother said, but so when you open it, the drawer does not become a mess. She smiled to herself. Her mother was far away. But in this night, in a strange town, the memory returned like a guest who knows the door. Harper struggled, folding the heavy blanket with Martha. Martha said, "A heavy blanket requires strength, but also rhythm." Harper placed the blanket down on the surface, 2 hands on the edge. Martha placed her hand on the girl's arm and said softly, "Do not use all your force. Let the fabric fall into its fold." The sentence sounded like a lesson about something bigger than how to fold a blanket. Olivia listened, then tried folding her thin sweater in that gentle way rather than forcing it. The result was neater, less wrinkled. One Friday evening, the laundromat was unexpectedly crowded. A small bus carrying the school's basketball team pulled in at the corner of the street because of a thin snowstorm. They filed into the laundromat to take shelter. A dozen voices speaking at once warmed up the atmosphere. Martha handed each one a cup of hot cocoa to warm their hands. Harper ran around passing out tissues. Olivia watched the noisy scene and found it strangely peaceful. Because this noise was not the noise of the mind, it was the sound of living. The kids leaned against the running washers. They said they vibrated like free massage chairs. Miguel laughed. He offered to help Martha bring in extra chairs. The coach thanked them profusely. After a while, the storm passed. The group of kids returned the laundromat to its quiet, as if returning a chair they'd borrowed. The doorbell tinkled. The wet street reflected the pale yellow street lamps. After that night, the town passed around word that Midnight was a place you could drop by any time when you were tired. You did not have to do laundry. You just needed to sit for a while. Some people stopped by just to hear the machine spin. Some brought an old shirt, hoping to save it. Some brought a letter they needed to send and asked Martha to read it with them before they stamped it. She never refused. She understood that people weren't looking for soap. They were looking for a steady rhythm. One day, Olivia arrived earlier than usual. The sun was still in streaks. The door was open. Martha was replacing a new rubber hose for the washer next to the wall. She apologized for being slow. Olivia said it was no rush. She helped hold the pliers. When the job was done, the two sat by the door drinking tea. Martha told how when she was young, she had planned to sell the laundromat and move to the city with her child. But one night, a heavy rain, a woman unknown ran into the shop late. She carried a bag of blankets and cried all the while, waiting for the machine to finish. She did not need anyone to comfort her. She just needed the sound of the spin. When she left, she said thank you for keeping the door open. That night, Martha decided to keep the shop. She said that sometimes the only thing needed in life is to open the door at the right time. Olivia got home late from work. She carried a white sheet her father had sent. The sheet smelled faintly of tobacco and old car. Olivia looked at it as though looking down a long road. She put it in the machine, added water, laundry detergent, sat down, and took a breath. In the drum, the sheet mingled with water and bubbles. Every old fold gradually softened. Olivia reached into the pocket of the shirt before the drum began. She found a small slip of paper. She opened it. Just an old receipt with a few numbers. But on its back was a short, handwritten line. Her father had written, "I meant to call you last week." Olivia folded the paper back. She sat still. The machine turned. The sound of water covered the thoughts. When the machine stopped, she picked up her phone. She called. Her father answered. They said a few trivial lines. She smiled once. He smiled once. She said she missed him. He said he missed her. The call ended like closing the lid of a small box. Not loud, but enough. Martha turned another year older. She began letting Olivia hold the key every weekend in case she got a headache. One morning early, Olivia opened the shop. She wiped the glass, aligned the detergent bottles, flipped on the lights. The doorbell chimed as the wind blew. She stood in the empty room and listened to the quiet. The quiet here had a rhythm waiting for someone to come, a rhythm waiting for a laundry basket, a rhythm waiting for a soft exhale like a bubble. If I were to say one thing, drawn from the Midnight Laundromat on Birch Street, perhaps it is that peace does not come from wiping every stain of life, but from how we patiently spin steadily and warmly with them. Each washer knows a simple truth. Water needs enough time to soak into the fibers. People are the same. We cannot force ourselves clean of the past in a hurried cycle. We can only sit, listen to life spin at a proper beat, believe that there are things that will dissolve when we loosen our grip, and there are things that will remain but become lighter when we fold them with gentle hands. When we understand that we pass through our long nights no longer feeling alone, because in some corner of a street there is still a room opening the door at the right hour, with machines spinning like distant waves, with people quietly dropping a coin into the slot, and with a kind shop owner reminding us that opening the door at the right time is sometimes enough to redeem a day. The story of the 7 flower beds behind the old station. The old train station of the town Maple Junction sat back to the north beyond a row of birch trees and some rusty freight cars that had long since retired. The tracks were removed for a stretch, and the remaining rails lay like a broken line among the wild grass. Every afternoon, sunlight slid across the faded, corrugated metal roof and settled on the warm wooden floorboards. Behind the station, there was an empty lot. It had once been used as a temporary stockyard for sawn timber. Later, it was abandoned, and weeds grew into a patchy carpet of green and brown. That spring, a woman arrived there, carrying a hand shovel and a small bag of seeds. Her name was Amelia. Amelia was 32 years old, working as a waitress during the day at a diner on Main Street, and attending evening singing class at the old church. She rented an attic room overlooking the red-tiled roof of the library. The doctor had told her just the month before that if she could find something steady to keep her hands and mind busy, she might break the pattern of recurring sadness. So she chose the land behind the old station because it was little visited and had enough sun. She began by pulling up thistles and digging long planting beds. Soil clung to her wrists. Sweat dropped into the earth like small raindrops of her own. Pedestrians strolling on the path in front would look in puzzling over what she was doing in such a neglected place. Amelia would just smile softly and keep working. On the 3rd day, a man in a wheelchair stopped by the dirt path. He wore an old baseball cap, his face weathered by sun. His name was Jack. He used to work on the railway, and he had long been retired. Jack asked her what she was planting. Amelia said she wasn't sure yet. She had brought zinnia, cosmos, kale, and a few sunflower seeds. Jack nodded, as though acknowledging an old friend. He told her that when he used to ride the train, this lot had been used for stacking timber ties. Every time he passed by, he thought it would be nice to plant a tree here. But shifts changed. Sleep was short, and the tree never came. Amelia smiled and said maybe now there was still time. Jack said he would bring her a little rake in good condition the next day. The first row Amelia planted was sunflowers. The seeds lay in the soil like sleeping eyes. She watered gently, not rushing. She remembered a phrase she had read somewhere. Each seed is a promise written in invisible ink. She placed her hand on the soil for a few seconds, as though signing a small pledge. After the sunflowers came colorful zinnia, then a swath of pale pink cosmos. The beds were straight, yet slightly tilted, as though a budding singer keeping rhythm, but allowing her breath to flow naturally. The next day, Jack appeared with the little rake. He showed Amelia how to pull the rake against the wind so dust would not blow into her face. He told stories of late-night shifts, the clank of steel wheels on the rails, sounding like a harp, losing a string. He told how his wife Linda loved wild daisies and still kept the woolen cap he bought at the harbor in the winter of his 30th year. Amelia listened, her hands moving without pause. She realized when someone speaks of a person who has passed, their voice lowers, as though they have learned to tread lightly on wooden floorboards. A week later, children from the mobile home park ran over to look. The oldest 11-year-old Noah asked curiously if she planted these flowers to sell or just for fun. Amelia said she planted them to look at. Noah laughed and said that was fine. He asked for a row of his own so he and the younger kids could water it. Amelia agreed. She gave them an old tin can with holes punched in the lid to make a watering can. The children were delighted because the water streamed out in many little threads. They watered too much. The soil puddled. Amelia did not scold them. She simply sat down with them, loosened the soil with her hands, and told them to water less tomorrow. The kids nodded very seriously. The town began to take notice of the garden behind the old station. Nora from the library brought a packet of white daisy seeds. Ben, the mailman, stopped his truck for a minute to leave an organic fertilizer package he had bought by mistake. Claire, the music teacher, dropped by after her lesson and left a small lavender plant she had grown. Occasionally, Thomas, the lamp keeper, strolled by, paused for a moment, and nodded as though greeting a mutual friend. Each late afternoon, when the sun withdrew from the corrugated roof, Amelia would sit down beside a row of soil, her back against the old wooden fence, inhaling the scent of earth as though breathing in a wordless song. The seeds sprouted after days of cold and warmth, chasing each other like two friends teasing each other. The first shoots pushed up soft and fresh like a child's fingertips. Amelia did not shout with joy. She leaned in close and whispered a tiny hello. The zinnia shoots grew thickly. The cosmos spread their delicate petals like paper. The sunflowers rose fastest. They stood solid like small gatekeepers. Each morning, their heads turned toward where the sun pulled back the curtains. Jack rolled his wheelchair along the dirt path, his fingers brushing the stems as though touching a warm pillar. One midday, a stiff wind blew. The sky grew gray clouds hung low. Still, Amelia came out to the garden. She wore a baseball cap, gloves on her hands, inspecting each row. One sunflower had broken in the wind. She buried it deeper into the earth and propped it with a slender bamboo pole. In her heart, something old sank down. She realized she cared for that small stem as though she were tending a story trying to stand. She remembered days when she too had needed a stake for support, but never said so. She placed her hand on the soil longer than usual. Word of the garden behind the old station reached the diner where Amelia worked. Some customers asked for directions to visit. Some stood and looked for 5 minutes before leaving. One elderly lady opened her bag and took out an old photo of herself with her husband in front of the station on their wedding day. She said she never thought there would be flowers behind the station. Amelia heard this and smiled slowly, as though someone had just snugged up a loose button on a coat. Summer arrived. The sunflowers bloomed into little suns on the brick wall. The zinnia painted the patch in cheerful patches of color. The cosmos floated like benign sighs. The lavender gave off a gentle fragrance at the edge of the breeze. The children brought a few colorful stones they had collected and placed them around the stems like a necklace. Jack set a small wooden sign in the soil, hand-carved with the words, "Garden behind the station." The letters were not perfectly straight, but looked warm as handwriting on hurried letters. One afternoon, as the sun was slowing its pace, a woman paused in front of the garden. Her name was Rachel. She used to sing in the same class as Amelia, then moved to another state 2 years ago. Now she had returned for work. Rachel stood for a long moment, then called Amelia. They embraced softly, without many words. That evening, Rachel told her that she had just ended a long, fading relationship. She said she was tired of having to be the strong one for both of them. Amelia listened and did not give any advice. She led Rachel along the row of sunflowers. She said when the flowers turn their faces toward the sun, it is not that they deny the darkness. It is just that they know which direction helps them breathe more deeply. Rachel nodded. She stooped down, smelled a red zinnia, her eyes closing, like someone who had just recognized the scent of their old kitchen. Late at night, Amelia locked the wooden gate. She sat a little while longer. The town was not noisy, only the sound of insects and the wind across the old tracks. She thought about the days before she dug the flower beds, the days when she went to work every day, came home every day, turned on the lights every day, but inside it felt like a station with no trains arriving. Now each morning she wakes up, opens the window, thinks of the garden, sees a slow train carrying small parcels of hope passing by. Not a fanfare, no fireworks, just a cry that has quieted down into a breath. In August, the town held a small night market at the station. Some stalls sold fruit preserves, baked goods, crafts. Amelia and the children set up a small table in front of the garden with a basket of cut zinnias and a creamy-colored mailbox. On the box, there was a card inviting whoever wanted to write something they were grateful for and drop it in. No name needed. No reading out loud. Before the market ended, the box was full of little folded papers. One read, "Thank you for the place to stop for 5 minutes." Another read, "Thank you for the sunflower that looked at me before I looked at it." Another simply said, "Mother." The children did not read them aloud. They placed the box in the garden corner and asked Jack to keep it, like keeping the town's seed box. One early morning, Amelia arrived at the garden earlier than usual. The air was still cool. Dew hung on the leaves, like unread text messages. She saw a stranger sitting on the wooden step. His name was David. He was the roofer working in the neighborhood behind. He said he often woke up early because he slept deeply with difficulty. He walked by here and sat a while because of the scent of lavender. Amelia poured him a cup of water from the jug she had brought. They said a few words about the weather and then fell silent. Both of them watched the sunflowers. After a while, David said, "Thank you for cultivating the garden." Amelia nodded. She realized there were some thank yous that are like a drop of water right when the ground is beginning to dry. At the end of the month, a hot wind arrived. The flowers wilted quickly. The children panicked because no matter how much they watered, it did not feel enough. Amelia taught them to cover the base with a thin layer of straw to retain moisture. She told them to water early in the morning instead of at midday. She said the meaning of enough changed depending on the day. Today, enough is one watering can. Tomorrow, enough is a mesh shade. The next day, enough is a hug for someone who is tired. The children nodded. They watered less, but at the right times. A few days later, the flowers stood again. When autumn came, the birch trees by the station began dropping their leaves like slow golden rain. The sunflowers bowed their heads. The zinnias remained patiently with their final blooms. The cosmos grew lighter, as like the breaths that have reached completion. Amelia kept some of the dried seeds. She placed them in small envelopes, wrote the names of the species in ink, and put them into a wooden box. She sent a few packs to Nora, a few to Mrs. Margaret at the bakery, a few to Rachel. She kept a few for Jack. He picked one up, touched it gently, and said this one weighed like a letter. On a winter's day, a thin layer of snow covered the garden like a light white scarf. Amelia still walked around, looking at the tree trunks that had grown stiff and bare. She felt no sadness. She knew what remained was sleeping beneath. Jack pushed his wheelchair along the dirt path, the wheels leaving curved tracks. He did not say much because of the cold. Before going home, he said that next year they would plant another variety. Amelia nodded and added, and some asters too. The children ran, slipped on the ice, on the path fell, then laughed. The town passed through the cold season with a little secret warmth left behind the station. One gray afternoon, Amelia received a small parcel. Inside was a black and white photograph of Mrs. Linda standing in front of a wildflower garden in the distant countryside. Behind her, a wooden barn and a low fence. On the back was Jack's writing, "Thank you for having planted flowers where he once only saw wood and dust." Amelia put the photo in a frame, placed it on the windowsill. She looked out, saw the part of the garden that was sleeping. She was thankful for that sleep, like being thankful for a night without bad dreams. Spring returned. The ice melted. The earth softened. The new shoots pushed through the layer of old leaves like small fingers, pulling back a blanket. Amelia tidied the path again. Jack took out last year's wood sign and scraped the edges. The children were a little taller, talked a little more, but watered a little more slowly. Rachel dropped by, said her voice was steadier now, and she had started teaching an adult class. David passed by, wearing his hard hat, saying the roof behind was finished, but each morning he still stopped by if it had not rained. The garden opened up like a notebook being continued. And so the flower garden behind the old station became more than a piece of ground to plant flowers. It became the place where the town learned to breathe together. Whether someone came to sit for 5 minutes or an hour, they left a little lighter. Someone left a piece of paper in the mailbox. Someone silently picked up trash by the fence. Someone brought a seed and a story. The garden did not ask for names. The garden only accepted and returned. It accepted sun returned blossoms. It accepted rain returned fragrance. It accepted a sigh, returned a quiet place. If one thing can be drawn from this, it might be that peace arrives when we dare to plant something in a place we once left empty. It might be that this place is the garden behind the old station. It might be that it is a small habit, like making tea each evening and sitting with oneself for 5 minutes. It might be that it is a phone call to someone we have been quiet with for too long. Each seed needs soil and time. Each story needs the shoulders of hands that work steadily. When we place our hands on the earth and do the small things at the right times, the sadness does not disappear immediately, but it learns to lie still, like the layer of dry leaves under the new shoots. Then, one day, we walk past our own little garden. We see a flower turning toward the sun, and we understand that we too are turning toward where we can breathe more deeply. When that happens, we no longer need to name anything. We only need to stay one more beat look and know that the garden has opened its door behind the old station of our heart. The story 8 tea houses by the wooden bridge. The seaside town named Seabrook nestled into a small bay in the state of Maine. In the morning, mist drifted from the water up to the porches of the wooden houses. In the afternoon, the wind carried the scent of salt and damp wood along the main street. At the end of Harbor Road, there was a wooden bridge spanning a narrow creek that linked the bay with the salt marsh behind. Right at the head of the bridge stood a small house painted light gray, its roof low, its glass door bearing hand-written blue ink lettering. On the glass were the words, "Tea House by the Wooden Bridge." The fishermen called it simply the House by the Bridge. The door opened at 6 in the morning and stayed open until the first 3 flashes of the lighthouse out at sea at night. The owner of the house was Hannah. She was 38 years old, her brown hair tied back her arms, marked by the tan of the sun. Hannah once worked as a restaurant manager in Boston, and after a family crisis, she returned to Seabrook, where she grew up. The tea house was the house her grandmother had left her. Hannah repaired the roof, stripped off the old paint, replaced the countertop with a board of honey-colored pine. On the shelves were glass jars holding loose teas: Earl Grey tea, peppermint tea, chamomile tea, ginger, honey tea. In one corner, there was a copper kettle shining sand-warm in color. The wooden floor was smooth from many footsteps. On the wall hung a black and white photo of this wooden bridge taken in decades past. The old photo was so old that the horizon looked like a thin pencil line. In the morning, the house opened to the scent of water just poured into the kettle and the smell of freshly baked oatmeal cookies. The dock workers would drop by before going out on their boats. They each asked for a cup of hot ginger tea, leaned against the counter, drank quickly, and left. A group of elderly folks who walked around the bay would then pop in at a table by the window. They would sit, hands around porcelain cups, watch the mist dissolve on the water, as though it were a story forming the backdrop for their conversation. Hannah moved quietly about, poured more hot water, when she saw the bright circle in the kettle fade. The wooden bridge was the shortcut between the houses and the docks. The sound of footsteps over the bridge in the morning was like the heartbeat of the town. Someone jogging, someone cycling slowly, someone walking a dog. Anyone who passed by could see the yellow glow inside the house and the figure of someone pouring tea. Passers-by across the bridge sometimes waved. Hannah answered with a slight nod. She kept the house open on time, even on approaching storm days. The door might be only half open, but the kettle was still on the stove. Eli appeared one foggy morning. He was the temporary lighthouse keeper this season. About 40, tall in build, his gaze steady. He came in before any other customers asked for a strong black tea. Hannah brewed the tea, set the cup down, and asked if the night watch at the lighthouse had been peaceful. Eli said the waves were high, but the light's rhythm remained steady. He sipped slowly and looked out the window. After that, each morning, he came again. Sitting at the table by the window, he opened a small notebook, wrote a few lines, and then left exactly on time to catch the small boat to the rocky outcrop. Hannah could not read the script in his notebook, but she guessed that it was work notes and a few fragments of thoughts drifting in from the night. The 10-year-old girl, May, living with her mother in the row of houses to the north, often dropped in after school. Her mother worked at the boat-building yard and came home late. May liked to sit on a high stool right at the counter, drink a mild cup of chamomile tea, and do her homework. She told stories about a seagull that had learned to snatch pastries from tourists, about a small ray caught in a net, and released about a craftsman called Caleb, who whistled while he worked. Hannah kept a jar of pencils and some white sheets of paper ready. May drew the wooden bridge, drew the little boats, drew the lighthouse, standing low like a brush at the horizon. May's drawings were posted in a row just behind the counter. Guests looked at them and often smiled. They said the drawings made the sky appear closer. The afternoon was quiet in the tea house. Hannah wiped the counter, arranged the jars of tea, wrote in the ledger. On some days, she turned on a small radio, played an old jazz program. The saxophone's sound was like another mist creeping over the bridge. She remembered her grandmother, who used to sit in the last chair by the window, drink peppermint tea, watch people come and go. Her grandmother said a tea house needed to know two things. The water must be boiled to the right temperature, and the smile must come at the right moment. Whenever she felt tired, Hannah thought of that phrase as if it were a rope mooring her mind to a harbor. One day, a man in a wet raincoat stepped in during a heavy downpour. He was a lost tourist. The map on his phone would not load. He asked to warm up and use the restroom. Hannah handed him a dry towel and poured him a cup of ginger honey tea. He sat for a while, closed his eyes so the steam rose over his face. When he opened his eyes, he looked at the old photograph on the wall and asked about the bridge. Hannah told him that the bridge had been replanked many times, but its old structure was preserved. He thanked her, placed some money on the counter, and left just as the rain began to slacken. The door closed softly. On the door frame, a few raindrops remained like little notes the rain had left behind. One early winter evening, the north wind began to sharpen. Eli arrived later than usual. He said the sea was very noisy last night. A fishing boat returned late because of the waves. The lighthouse's beam swept over the white foam steadily, like a hand soothing. That evening, he wrote nothing. He just sat quietly, with a cup of black tea. Hannah did not ask. She placed a small hot water pot on the table so he could refill if he liked. In the cafe, she was learning not to fill every empty space with words. Some spaces need to be left untouched, like a pool reflecting the moon. At Thanksgiving, the cafe closed for half a day, so everyone could go home. The day before, Hannah placed a small box with a note reading, "Thank you, Ba." Customers could write a few words and drop them in. At the end of the day, she opened it. One note said, "Thank you for the smell of ginger tea that got me through a hard morning." Another said, "Thank you for letting me borrow the power outlet when my laptop was about to die." Another simply drew a bridge and a heart. Hannah folded each note and placed it in a glass jar on the shelf. The jar sat next to a jar of chamomile tea like two close friends. In December, snow fell thinly, and the wooden bridge creaked when people walked on it. Hannah placed a rubber mat at the door so customers would not slip. Eli fixed the loose windshield by the edge of the bridge. May brought to the cafe a handmade card with snowflakes cut from white paper. She wrote, "May the cafe always smell of tea. Hannah taped the card beside an old photograph. The cafe looked like a family journal, still being written. One evening, the cafe was quiet. Near closing time, a woman entered. Her cloak was dark, her knit gloves, her eyes red from the wind or from something else. She said she needed a cup of peppermint tea. Her voice was hoarse. Hannah brewed the tea, set the cup down, and did not ask. The woman held the cup with both hands, inhaled and exhaled as though relearning how to breathe. She stayed a while. Before leaving, she left some coins and a jade green button on the counter, saying she had lost the matching button somewhere today, and now she was leaving the remaining one in exchange for a cup of tea and a warm seat. Hannah held the button for a long moment after the woman left. She placed it in the glass jar of things people had left. In the jar was a small seashell, an old ferry ticket, a hair tie, a scrap of paper with one line of poetry. That storm season, a strong wind blew along the coast. The waves hit the seawall fiercely. The lighthouse still swept its beam steadily. The cafe beside the bridge closed earlier than usual. But during the time it was open, a few people came in to take refuge. They sat together, hearing the wind strike the wooden threshold, hearing the tea boil, hearing the spoon tap the cup's side. Eli stood at the door, looking out at the bridge, making sure the handrail was secure. May and her mother stepped in to take home a pot of hot water. Each person left into the wind, holding something warm in their hands, as though holding a promise. When the storm passed, the road glistened with tiny shards of ice. The bridge was still there. The cafe reopened the next morning with the scent of freshly baked oatmeal cookies. In March, the ice melted, and the first patches of grass appeared beside the creek. A white-painted wooden boat that had just been fixed slid into the water. The boat's owner invited Hannah for a short row. Hannah declined at first because she was busy, then changed her mind. She asked Eli to watch the cafe for 15 minutes. He nodded, standing behind the counter with a seriousness rarely seen. Hannah took a short row on the creek. The water was cold, but the sun was beginning to warm. She returned to find Eli had poured tea for 2 customers and wrote in the journal with his neat, square handwriting. He smiled and said that doing this job turned out not to be hard when the scent of tea is already in the air. From then on, occasionally, Hannah also stepped out of the cafe for a little while without guilt. She thought of what her grandmother once said: "Opening the door on time is half the job. The other half is knowing when to hand the flame to someone else." for a few minutes. Spring poured into the cafe via lighter footsteps and brighter jackets. May brought new color paintings. Eli wrote more in the journal. Hannah experimented with a lemon peel tea blended with garden mint leaves. Young customers liked it. The older ones said adding a drop of honey would soothe the throat. The cafe gradually learned the town's rhythm. On heavy cloud days, black tea sold well. On light sunny days, chamomile tea sold out early. On good news days, customers stayed longer. On sad news days, customers drank more slowly. One early summer day, a group of city tourists stopped by the bridge, took photos of the cafe. They asked Hannah if there was a specialty of the place. Hannah said there was a simple thing called sea tea. She boiled water with a clean little stone, washed from the shore, added mint leaves, added a pinch of sea salt. She poured it into a cup and said this was what her grandmother made for the fishermen long ago when they returned after a long day. The tourists drank, said the taste was strange, but gentle. They bought a few bags of tea to take home. The cafe gained a new story to tell in the afternoons. At the summer festival, the town erected a small stage in the park facing the bay. Claire organized a music performance for the students. Hannah brought a large teapot to serve. Eli helped carry chairs. May stood singing in the choir, her voice clear, like the sound of porcelain cups touching. When the last song ended, the sea breeze carried the smell of wet grass. Hannah stood at the edge of the stage, looking at her town as though she were looking at a sturdy little boat. She saw familiar faces and new ones, saw Harbor Road, saw the wooden bridge, saw the lighthouse. Everything was present. That was enough. One evening, Eli handed Hannah a page of the journal. He had written a short passage about the light on the shore when rain was coming, and the sound of tea boiling when one was still far from shore. He said that after this season, he would move on to another lighthouse farther south. His work forced him to travel. Hannah read and closed the journal. She said the cafe would miss him. Eli smiled and said, "Any lighthouse has a cafe like this, somewhere where someone pours tea and people wait for quiet." Hannah knew he was speaking to ease things, but she also knew she had just learned something. Some people belong to long coastlines. They cannot stand still at one point. The only thing we can do for them is give them a warm cup of tea in the morning. On the day Eli left, the sky was bright. He walked across the bridge, paused in the middle, turned, and looked at the cafe. Hannah stood at the door, waved. May ran after him and gave him a small drawing of the lighthouse and the cafe. He accepted, folded it carefully, then left. That afternoon, the cafe was quieter than usual. Hannah turned on a small radio to listen to the weather report. The storm season was still far away. She washed the teapot, rearranged the shelves. She placed the empty journal on the shelf beside the glass jar. From then on, anyone who wanted could write a few lines and leave them. On the first day, there was a very short line. "Thank you for the morning here, reminding me I did not need to hurry." Autumn returned the maple leaves. At the end of the street turned red. The Menhaden swam into the creek. People crossing the bridge wore thicker coats. The cafe was still open on time. There were new faces learning to greet one another with the eyes. There were people returning after a long season. The scent of tea and the scent of wood continued to make friends each day. Hannah acquired a new habit of sitting for a few minutes on the step at the door before closing. She looked at the wooden bridge darkening, looked at the water thickening like ink, heard the boat lines tapping against the posts. She saw everything passing through that day. A man who lost his way, a little girl painting pictures, a fish market worker bringing good news, a woman leaving behind a button. She counted how many pots of tea she had poured. She noticed the slow breaths when the cups were placed down. She realized she was present in the day in a way that was not loud. If I were to pull one thing out from the tea shop by the wooden bridge in Seabrook, it would perhaps be this piece rarely arrives as a loud voice. It comes as a hot cup of tea placed down at the right moment when your palm is still cold. It comes as a wooden bridge, not perfectly beautiful, but sturdy, helping someone cross a narrow water gap without wetting their shoes. It comes as someone who opens the door on time, asks no too many questions, knows when to add hot water, knows when to let the silence remain. Someone lives a long day, not because they have huge events, but because they have many small spots to stop and breathe. A tea shop, a bench facing the bay, a lighthouse, beam, a wooden bridge. When we train ourselves to set these pause points into our living schedule, we cannot avoid the winds, but we will always have a place to pour the tea again and call our own name gently. And when we leave the cafe to cross the bridge, even though night has fallen, we know there are still small streaks of light on the water. Those are the lights of a place that gave us a few minutes of stillness and the light of ourselves, when we know to say thank you to a day that has passed. The story of Room 9, the silent listening room at Maple Library. Maple Library sits on Main Street with its gray-tiled roof and red brick facade, the stone steps worn by years of footsteps. In the morning, the place smells of fresh paper and polished wood. In the afternoon, sunlight slants through the tall windows in long beams, fine dust motes drifting like peaceful pollen. On the second floor, at the end of a narrow corridor, there is a small room that had formerly been used to store old newspapers. One winter, the head librarian, Nora, proposed converting the room into a place to sit and listen. She called it the Silent Listening Room. Nora, in her 30s, hair tied low-kind brown eyes. She grew up in this very town, spent several years away, and returned when her mother fell ill. In Boston, she used to work in a building where the air conditioning never stopped, and email pings chimed incessantly. When she came back to Maple, she realized what she missed most was the slow heartbeat of the old library. The silent listening room came to her one afternoon while she watched library visitors sitting quietly for long stretches at the wooden tables, their hands resting on a page while their eyes gazed out the window. She thought maybe people do not just need to read. They need to sit with a gentle sound so that the rhythm in their chests can return to the right tempo. The whole library pitched in. Ben, the mail carrier, brought an old vinyl turntable that had been retired to the storage cellar. Claire, the music teacher, donated a pair of small wooden grill speakers. Thomas, who runs the lantern shop on Willow Street, lent a low vintage desk lamp with golden honey light. Hannah, at the tea house by the bridge, brewed a box of peppermint tea and sent it along with a few ceramic cups. Jack, a former railroad worker, engraved a small wooden sign with the words "Silent Listening Room" and placed it outside the door. The italic, rustic lettering looked like a gentle smile. Nora laid a thick carpet on the floor, placed 3 low armchairs upholstered in linen-colored fabric, and set up a small shelf holding a few dozen records she'd found during the cleanup. There were slow, classical pieces, gentle jazz, a few recordings of rainforest rain and ocean waves, and even the crackle of a fireplace recorded at a studio in Vermont. On the low table lay a notebook with a pencil for anyone who wanted to write something after listening. The door to the room was not locked, just softly closed. Inside, there was always the faint smell of tea and warm wood. On opening day, Nora posted a sheet at the front desk. The Silent Listening Room is open from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. Each person may choose one record and stay as long as they like. No registration required. No phone calls. No hurry. The paper was simple. On that first afternoon, 5 people came. A kindly elderly woman wearing a wool scarf, a high school student named Ethan, a young woman with a toddler, a man who had just moved into town and worked as a roofer named David, and a passing traveler. They sat down. Nora lowered the tone arm. The record spun a slow piano piece, opened like a window ajar. In the first month, the listening room slowly became a habit of the town. May, the little girl who draws at the tea house after school, sometimes came up here holding a warm cup of tea, listening to a rainfall track and sketching the wooden bridge with a soft pencil. Martha, the laundromat owner on Birch Street, often dropped in on Monday evenings, sat in her armchair, so the sound of fabric brushing fabric in her mind could spread, then returned to open her shop in the quiet hours. Miguel, a track worker, occasionally came to listen to a recording of a train rolling on remote mountain rails, sat with a slight smile because his palms had loosened their grip. Amelia, the gardener, behind the old station, brought a few zinnias and placed them on the table and said the room needed color. Nora smiled, put a low glass vase on the table, the red flowers standing like a few bright musical notes. The listening room was small, but knew how to hold people. In the golden light of the lamp, people sat not to escape life, but so that life could walk slowly through them, like a gentle stream. Sometimes the peace was thin ocean waves, and everyone heard the sea in their memory. Sometimes it was leaves rustling, and someone remembered a late afternoon under red maple branches in front of their house. Nora rarely spoke in the room. She often poured tea, placed it near the guest's hand, then stepped back to the doorframe, leaned against the wood, and listened along. At the desk, she was quick. In the room, she learned to walk slowly, like a cat. One early winter evening, a thin storm crept through the town. The library was still open. The listening room was warmer than outside. At 7 o'clock, a middle-aged man stood at the door hesitant. His name was Caleb, a boat builder at the workshop north of town. In his hand, he held a woolen cap soaked through. Nora invited him in and handed him a dry towel. Caleb said he was not familiar with music. Nora told him the room did not ask anyone to be familiar. She chose a recording of fireplace crackling and snow outside the porch. Caleb sat eyes closed. When the track ended, he opened his eyes and smiled for the first time that day. He said the room reminded him of his grandmother's stories by the hearth. Nora nodded, dimmed the lamp, and let him sit 5 more minutes without any sound. One day, a youngster entered the room, set aside his personal headphones, sat listening to a slow cello piece. Afterwards, he scribbled a short line in the notebook. Listening slower made me hear my heart's voice. After that sentence came the words of others. Thank you for letting me sleep 10 minutes in this chair without embarrassment. Thank you for having a place where I can listen to rain, even when it is not raining. Thank you for turning on the lamp at the right hour The notebook became a whisper box. Mid-season, there was a small incident. The old record turntable stalled the tone arm. A scratchy click snapped. Nora switched off the machine, removed the cartridge, cleaned the fine dust built up from months. She called Ben and asked if there was a spare cartridge. Ben found one in the box and brought up a replacement wrapped in newspaper. It looked ragged, but was still new. Nora installed it, tested a record to spin. The sound returned full and warm. People in the room applauded softly, as if applauding a bird that just escaped rain. Nora began organizing listening hours with very gentle themes, with no obligation. Tuesdays were water sounds. Thursdays were wind sounds. The last Sunday of the month was a session where anyone could bring a sound they had preserved. That day, an elderly man brought a recording of church bells from his childhood town. A young woman brought the sound of the tram in Chicago. A little boy brought a recording of a cat purring in a basket. Each sound played. The room became a shore. No one needed to speak much, but everyone felt less alone. One rainy afternoon, Rachel, a friend of Amelia's, returned to town after several months performing at small venues. She stopped by the library, listened to a very slow jazz record, and then wrote in the notebook. When I let myself slow down, the lyrics found where they needed to land. Nora read it and smiled. She placed a small slip of paper on the edge of the page to find it easily next time. Not because the words were more special than others, but because it was a rhythm that resonated with many. There was one evening when the room was unusually quiet. Nora poured herself a cup of tea and played a recording of wind blowing through pine forests in Maine during the winter. She sat in a chair, watching the golden light, listening to the wind pass through pine needles, like thousands of hands brushing lightly together. In that wind, memories of cold neon lights and the rushed tempo of Boston resurfaced. So did the evening she left the city, sitting at the bus station, gripping her bag strap, and the face of her mother napping in the armchair beneath the window of their old home. The sound brought the past back without hurting. It placed everything gently on a quiet shelf lit by a desk lamp with space for each breath. At the end of the year, Nora placed a cardboard box outside the room with a sign, "Leave a small sound if you like." Inside it, slowly filled with little things. A hollow seashell that sounded like the ocean when held to the ear. A slip of paper with the radio frequency of the local weather station. A broken wind chime. A coin dropped in a glass cup, making a single tone. A stubby pencil tapping the edge of a table. The room began collecting these tiny pieces of the world, turning them into little dots that helped listeners recognize the path they were on. In March, the ice thawed. Nora opened the window just a crack to let in the tail end of winter. The smell of early rain arrived. One afternoon, Olivia from the laundromat stopped by, her hands still smelling of soap. She sat and listened to the soft sound of rain. When the track ended, she said that at the laundromat, after the machine spins long enough, the clothes feel light. And here, after a track finishes, so does her mind. Nora nodded, feeling like all the rooms in town were somehow connected by threads of music. There was a boy named Noah who used to water the garden behind the old station. He had grown a head taller by now and came to the listening room one Sunday. He brought with him an old alarm clock. He placed it on the table, wound it close to the hour, and everyone listened to the small metallic ring of the bell. Noah said that sound used to wake him up for school on nights when his parents were working late shifts. The bell rang, then stopped. Someone in the room quietly whispered, "Thank you." No one laughed. The sound joined the shelf alongside the others, like a new friend. One early summer evening, the listening room was full. The library downstairs had closed, but Nora kept the room open for an extra hour. Outside, the air was cool, and insects chirped softly. Inside, people sat close, but still felt there was room to breathe. Nora played a long track of bay waves and paddle strokes against water. May stared at the desk lamp like it was a shoreline. Amelia flipped through the Whisper notebook. Ben leaned against the wall, eyes half closed. Martha held her teacup as if it were a bird she did not want to fly away. Nora stood by the door, sensing a shared rhythm flowing through the building, like the town hall's chime, but softer and deeper. One day, a young man, a stranger, walked in and stood for a long while staring at the record shelf. He spoke quietly, saying he had not slept well in weeks. Nora handed him a cup of tea and asked what sound he would like to hear. He said, "Rain on pavement." Nora chose a track that recorded steady rain falling on concrete in an unnamed city. As the rain began, the man leaned back into the chair, eyes closed. By halfway through the track, his breathing was even. At the end, he sat up and said he felt like he did not have to get better. By tomorrow, he just needed to sleep. Nora smiled and handed him a small card with the room's daily opening hours. At the end of summer, the listening room hosted a session outside. Nora carried the wooden speakers to the porch, ran a power cord, and set out wooden chairs. On the grass, children lay on their backs, looking up at the purple sky. Adults sat with arms folded. The track was the sound of nighttime fields, and a few low horn notes. As the sound faded, fireflies blinked like punctuation marks. No one clapped. They all just inhaled deeply and exhaled at once, then quietly gathered their chairs, like tidying up a beautiful dream. Autumn returned. Maple leaves turned red along Main Street. Nora changed the record needle again. She wiped dust off the record shelf with care, as if cleaning the glass of a family photo frame. The listening room still opened from 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock. The visitors were no longer strangers, but each time someone sat down, they still felt like a new guest in an old room. They learned to tuck their phones away, like setting down a hat before entering a church. They learned to sip tea slowly. They learned that no words were needed after a piece of music. On the last page of the notebook, Nora wrote in small letters, "A quiet room does not make life's noise disappear, but it teaches us how to pass through the noise without losing our breath." She put down the pencil, closed the notebook, poured more tea, and adjusted the record. Evening shadows slid onto the stone steps. Downstairs, someone gently shut the library door. Inside the room, the desk lamp glowed like a ripe tangerine. Nora heard the footsteps of the evening's first guest pause at the door. She smiled, lifted the tone arm, and let the music begin, like a kind of light that did not need to be seen. And if there were one lesson to take from the silent listening room at Maple Library, perhaps it is this: we do not need a grand stage or a formal speech to return to ourselves. All we need is a small room where gentle sound stands, watch, giving the heart a moment to pause, letting the day's weight settle, like dust smoothing the creases on the forehead, with just enough rain, just enough wind, just enough fire. And when we rise and step back into the hallway, we carry a more even rhythm, more grateful, like someone who has just sorted the pages inside themselves into neat bundles, placed them on a shelf, and walked away with lighter hands. The story of Slow Stitch. Tailoring on Laurel Street. Laurel Street runs parallel to Main Street in the town of Ashbury, but is a quieter tier, down like a small stream flowing beside a larger river. During the day, sunlight falls on wooden signboards. At night, the light from the windows casts yellow streaks lying still on the sidewalk. Near the section, by the park, between a locksmith's shop and a seed store, there is a small shop painted cream. On the glass is the handwritten line, "Slow Stitch Tailoring." Inside is the scent of clean fabric, the smell of the measuring stick's wood, and the aroma of herbal tea someone has just poured. The owner is named Evelyn. Evelyn is in her early 50s, with a few silver hairs at her temples, wearing thin-rimmed glasses. She speaks softly, and her hands are steady at work. On the wall are wooden shelves holding spools of thread in every color. A large wooden cutting table sits by the window to catch the light. Beside it is an old-style sewing machine that hums like the wind inside the house. On the windowsill, there is a small flower vase, sometimes white daisies, sometimes lavender, sent by Claire, sometimes zinnia, that Amelia brought from her garden behind the old station. The shop is open from 10 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock in the evening, only closed on the first Sunday of the month, when Evelyn goes for a walk alongside the park to give her eyes room to look far. People come to slow-stitch tailoring for all sorts of fabric reasons. A man brings a heavy coat needing the zipper replaced. A young woman needs her dress hemmed to fit just right. A child brings a worn backpack, wanting a patch before the first day of school. Evelyn takes each item, lays it on the table, uses chalk to draw faint marks, asks a few short questions, then gives a number of days. She rarely promises same-day completion. Here, people are used to waiting. No one is impatient, because everyone understands the name already hints at the rhythm of the place. One early autumn midday, Hannah from the tea shop by the wooden bridge brought in her grandmother's tablecloth, the fabric already worn the edge, fraying. Evelyn spread the cloth out, ran her fingers along the weft threads. She told her, "This fabric has passed many dinners." Hannah smiled. Evelyn nodded, once more like someone who has just heard a story. She placed the cloth on the table, took a fine needle, folded the fringe, back threaded each stitch with the kind of patience that makes a bystander slow their pace too. A young fellow named Cole from the woodworking shop visited the shop in the late afternoon. His work shirt had a long tear across the chest from catching on a nail. He said he needed it mended, but don't make it look too obvious, because his friends would tease him. Evelyn gave a gentle laugh, said she had a way. She cut a scrap of old fabric in a matching tone, layered it lightly on top, like a healed scar on skin, rather than a hidden one. When he tried it on in front of the mirror, Cole was surprised, because the seam seemed to tell a story instead of hiding something. He nodded, thanked her, walked out, then turned back to say, maybe he should learn to look at his own scars like that too. A little girl named May arrived on a drizzly afternoon. She brought her old teddy bear with one ear torn. May sat in the chair by the window, her two little feet touching each other in rhythm. Evelyn stitched the bear a new ear from a small patterned scrap cut from an old shirt someone had left. When handing it back, Evelyn told May that sometimes an object becomes more beautiful after one repair. May hugged the bear, nodded very seriously, then looked around the shop as though to memorize the color of the threads and the sound of the machine. Nora, the librarian, brought in her mother's wool jacket. The wool had run a bit at the wrist. Evelyn used a tiny crochet hook, like a pencil, going round each loop, patiently guiding the run back into the old weave. Nora told her about the quiet listening room at the library and said that bringing one thread back into its place is like bringing the breath back into tempo. Evelyn glanced at Nora, smiled her hands still on the wool loop. One evening, the shop was quiet. Evelyn poured a cup of peppermint tea, turned on the radio to listen to an old music program. The desk lamp spread a soft gold patch on the wood. She took from the drawer a man's faded blue shirt. She was not mending it for a customer. She was mending her ex-husband's shirt. He has been gone many years. The shirt had a small tear beside the third button. She had not touched it for a very long time. Now she laid it down, threaded the needle, repaired it, as though correcting a miswritten letter carried across years. She did not feel sad. She let her eyes follow each stitch like a delayed but right time farewell. Another day, a woman named Lila brought in her mother's wedding dress. Ivory white fabric, hand-stitched lace sleeves. Lila wanted the waist taken in the shoulders, let out, and a few stains cleaned. Evelyn listened, then told Lila to come back in 3 days for the fitting. Lila said the wedding day was coming soon. Evelyn paused for a second, then said she would put aside other work finish in time, but still proceed slowly, in the ways slow must. In those 3 days, she used gentle soap mixed with lemon to treat the stains dried in the shade, so the lace would not burn hand-stitched where the machine could not reach. Each stitch was like a breath. When Lila tried it on, the dress hugged the body, the lace soft like wind. She looked in the mirror, cried, hugged Evelyn, like embracing a close family member after a long time. Evelyn held her gently, then let go. She handed her a small handkerchief embroidered with the initial L, telling her to carry it along to calm the nerves. Ben, the mailman, has the habit of standing at the shop door for 10 minutes in the afternoon to loosen his shoulders. He brings a few forgotten envelopes, an old train ticket, sometimes the daily newspaper. He tells a story about the clock in the town hall, running again, as regularly as breathing. Evelyn listens, still folding the fabric's hem. She says that the clock and the sewing machine share the same secret. You just need the right oil in the right place, and someone who knows how to listen for the smallest sound. A veteran named Marcus once came asking to have a tear in the knee of his trousers repaired. He said He could not sleep easily at night. His clothes always caught on each other because stray threads stuck out. Evelyn repaired the tear with deliberate loose stitches so it would not be entirely hidden. She said that some rips deserve acknowledgement. Marcus was silent for a long time. He paid, stood at the door, turned around, and said that here the needle does not prick painfully. Evelyn laughed, saying that the sound of the machine running is also a healing melody. Once the door opened, and Rachel walked in, holding a thin leather jacket whose lining seam was torn. She smiled and said the outside still looked fine, only the inside needed care. Evelyn nodded, placed the jacket on the table, flipped it inside out, slipped her hand in, and made a long line of stitches. She said that if the inside is good, the outside will last longer. Rachel stood watching, then said quietly that this is not only true for jackets. Evelyn did not reply. She only set the scissors down more gently than usual. On a Saturday, Amelia brought pieces of fabric that had fallen off the fence behind the old station. She wanted Evelyn's help to piece them into a small cloth for children to spread on the wooden steps to sell flowers. Evelyn agreed. She selected various scraps and stitched them into a patchwork. Each seam was like a reunion meeting of colors that once never thought to go together. When the cloth was finished, Amelia touched the surface and said her hand could feel the seasons. Evelyn realized that fabric had its own way of telling time, slow yet steady. One evening, near dusk, a man stood outside the door for a while before coming in. His name was Aaron, a long-haul truck driver who stayed overnight in the town. He brought a plaid shirt with the second button undone. Evelyn threaded her needle. Quickly, waited until he finished a cup of tea, then returned it. Aaron buttoned it up, said that for 2 weeks he had been unable to button that one, and it felt like his speech had declined. Evelyn just smiled. As he walked out, he paused, asked why the place was called Slow Sewing House. She said that there are some things which, if done fast, finish the visible part, but the part you hold in your hand will not rest. He nodded, wished her a good evening, and walked away as if lighter by the very small amount that was just enough. At the start of winter, snow fell fine. The warm lamp and the sound of the sewing machine became as familiar as the sound of a gas burner quietly lit. Evelyn accepted fewer items to keep the rhythm. In the evenings, she sometimes sewed by hand pieces, not in a rush. She liked simple back stitches, going up, going down, like someone climbing old stairs. Each stitch was a time her hand touched the fabric, her eye touched the needle, her heart touched a bit of peace. A minor incident happened on a day with many customers. The main sewing machine suddenly stalled and then went silent. Evelyn switched it off, opened the cover, found the old belt had cracked. She pulled out her phone and called Cole at the woodworking shop for help finding a replacement belt. Cole came immediately, put on gloves, bent down, and installed it. While waiting, Evelyn shifted to hand sewing. The customers waiting formed a gentle circle. Nora brewed tea, Hannah sent over. Ben told the story that outside in the hall, a group of students were setting up a small stage for a play. Martha, from the laundry shop, brought over some wooden clothespins. No one was impatient. When the machine ran again, Evelyn looked up and smiled, realizing that her shop's sign was not just the sound of the machine. It was the sound of people sitting together in the same rhythm. At year's end, Evelyn placed a small wooden box on the counter with the inscription, "If you wish, leave a small fabric scrap." The box gradually filled with bits of fabric cut from old shirts, old scarves, old bed sheets. Some scraps printed with faint stars, some navy stripes, some tiny floral prints. Evelyn used them to patch items free of charge for children's clothing or for travelers passing through who needed a quick repair. Each small piece of fabric was a greeting stitched together into the town's large blanket in a way that no one needed to see the full picture. On New Year's Eve, Evelyn closed the shop later than usual. She folded the cloths, turned off her machine, placed the needle in its resting position. Outside on Laurel Street, the wind blew, and the neighbors' wind chimes rang like spoons clinking against cups. She sat in the chair near the door, leaned back, listened in her head to the sound of the sewing machine running evenly. Throughout the year, she had driven hundreds of stitches, forward and back. She thought about the stories woven into the fabric. A sweatshirt with a stain cleared in time for Miguel's family Christmas. A wedding dress fitting just right. A teddy bear with newly sewn ears. A wool jacket of Nora's mother no longer fraying. A tablecloth of Hannah's grandmother's with its hem repaired. She smiled because the small things become big when we do them consistently and kindly. In spring, the window opened to let the breeze in. The fabric scrap donation box was still full. Evelyn hung a white scrap in front of the door with small blue ink letters reading, "Today we sew a little more slowly." Customers entering all smiled. No one objected, because they too wanted to go a little slower. A student came by to mend ripped knee jeans before their performance at the park. Evelyn asked what song. They said a slow folk song. She nodded, threaded the needle, and said, "When you sing slowly, the words will find the right place to stand." One afternoon, Claire brought a long performance gown that needed to be shortened. She and a few students were going to play music in the town hall's foyer. Evelyn placed the gown on the table, measured quickly, cut a clean line. Claire asked what time the set would end. Claire smiled and said it ends when everyone breathes at the same time. Evelyn listened, remembered that her machine stopped best when the needle returned to its straight, upright position, not off tilt. In time, people began to bring to the slow sewing house on Laurel Street, not just clothes. They brought a full day that needed a stitch. They sat for a while, watched Evelyn's hands go back and forth, and naturally, their heartbeats slowed. Some said the machine's sound reminded them of their grandmother sewing clothes. Some said that just looking at the spools of thread of every color was enough to calm them. Some picked up a scrap to take home. No idea when they would use it, just wanting a reminder that what needs mending can always be mended. And if one thing can be drawn from the slow sewing house on Laurel Street, perhaps it is that peace rarely arrives like a wave. It comes like each small stitch passing through a wrinkled fabric, slow, steady, unflashy. Each stitch does not erase the rips we already have in our lives, but helps them lie quietly in a new form, stronger, gentler. People are the same. We cannot erase all the rips in our lives with one single decision. We can only sit down, breathe, bring each small stitch of good habit into the fabric of our day. Drink a cup of tea at just the right moment. Go to bed 15 minutes earlier. Walk 5 circuits around the park. Say a word of thanks. Ask someone else to hold the flame for a few minutes while we step away. By doing this, one day, when we look in the mirror, we will see that the seams where we were torn do not make us uglier. They look like honest stories, told giving our surface of life depth and warmth. And then, even when night has fallen, the sewing machine rhythm in our heart is still ticking steadily, reminding us that we are held by threads that are kind and long-lasting, and that tomorrow we will wake and stitch another one, not hurried, but sure. Tonight, you have walked with me through 10 stories, 10 gentle breaths of life. Each story is not just a dream told in words, but a small mirror reflecting the peace that still exists within you. In the midst of all the noise, the people, the long days, and the wounds that have not yet healed, there are still these tiny pockets of stillness where all you need to do is breathe, to be present, to let your heart rest. You do not need to try to be someone else, and you do not need to force yourself to forget anything. Healing is not about running away. It is about staying long enough to see that even the cracks can glow. Every slow breath, every gentle story is a way for you to stitch back the softest part of your soul. If tonight, even for a brief moment, your heart feels a little lighter, as fleeting as a breeze through the window, then this journey has already come full circle. Just remember, stillness does not come from the outside. It lives within you, waiting to be touched with tenderness. Thank you for being here, for listening, for giving yourself a little pocket of peace in this noisy world. If you want someone to whisper stories like this to you, again, on future nights, stories about light, about breath, about coming home, then do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Not for the numbers, but so that each time night falls, you can simply open this channel, close your eyes, and let the voice guide you home to the place your soul has always belonged. Wishing you a deep, peaceful sleep and a morning that feels soft and light.